work session on Tuesday, January 21st. We are going to, let me announce, Commissioner Francie Jacoba is at the River District Board meetings, and so she will not be joining us today. She did submit some comments of our work today, however, for me to share with you all. And so let's get started with a review of our short-term rental licensing code and code amendments. And shall I turn to Nicole or Jeanette to kick us off? Okay.
Good afternoon.
It is now.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, welcome, and Jeffrey, hello, I'm Jeanette Muzio, Picton County's short-term rental administrator. Today we're going to be discussing continuation from the work session on October 1st. And the 5 items we're going over is the STR program fees, public noticing, program enforcement, minimum and maximum night stays, and the application requirements and process. And I put an asterisk next to number 1 because we're going to be focusing on the program fees today in context that we have an hour, so we don't want to try to cover that. And Alex is our analyst. He's going to go over the program fees, what the staff is proposing for the change.
Yeah, thank you, Alex Sanchez, Community Development Analyst. So there are some changes from what's going to be presented to you than what was originally provided in the AIS. This is something we've looked at a lot and taken a lot of the comments and really tried to put together a new proposed fee structure that I think achieves all of the goals we heard. Before we get started, I do think it is important to talk about some of the terms that we'll be referencing. The fee structure that we currently have is based on the assessor's office 2022 actual values. So in the 2 bullet points you see here, the bottom is the assessed values. That's not something we'll be talking about. When we're talking about terms, that's really not anything that will be brought up. Primarily, we'll be looking at the total actual value. Now that's the land plus improvement. And the reason we're going to recommend the total actual value, for some properties, if you remove the land price and just look at improvement, properties that are up here that might have a higher land value actually would have received a reduced STR fee because the land value, when it's taken out, the improvement is not that high. And on the flip side, properties that are down valley, when we took into account improvement actual value, saw an increase in fees. So properties in the Crystal would have actually paid more, whereas properties in Red Mountain or in Willoughby Way would have seen a reduction. So as we're talking through this, the total actual value is really going to be the number we recommend because it's taking into account land plus improvement. And then the other piece, just before we get into the specifics that I think is important to discuss, is agricultural properties and those that are assessed agricultural. So we talked with the assessor's office and understood for a property to be assessed agricultural, it's a very rigorous process. They look at a lot of different items. And for any more information, I'd point you there. I know just a little bit, but not enough to be an expert in their field. But if they are assessed agricultural, they see a reduction in all of those different categories, the land, the improvement, and the total. So what was brought up is, could we create a way for those properties that are agricultural to see a reduced fee? We feel that that's already baked in because they have a lower total actual value. And so that lower value would then have a multiplier and result in a lower fee. So we thought that was important to just kind of set the stage as we talk through some of this and hopefully answer some of the discussions in the previous meeting. And just again, for anybody, those in the public or the board, I pulled a screenshot from the assessor's office, and at the top is where you see the actual values that we'll be discussing, and towards the bottom is that assessed value. And Nicole, if you go ahead to the next one. Again, just really want to highlight we're going to be living in this top section of actual values and really that bottom row in total actual value. So if anybody in the public wants to go through this process with their own property, that total actual value row is where you'd be pulling the numbers that would then be resulting in whatever proposed fee you would have for your property. So now to talk currently where we are with our fee structure and where we are proposing. Our current fee structure is based on 2022 assessed total actual value. There's 3 categories that somebody can choose. Seasonal STR gives you the most amount of nights. Otherwise limited is 20 or less. And then we have a tier in between. With either of those categories, there is a multiplier, a 0.07% and a 0.05% at the bottom. Where we are now going to be looking at, and we'll explain how we arrived at this, is going to update to the 2024 assessor total actual value. So that is updating from the 2022. And then the multiplier has been decreased. The highest category would be at 0.04%, and the lowest category would be at 0.02%. So by updating to the current total actual value of 2024 and reducing the fee, that number based on what people had paid in 2024 will still cover our budget. And that's the big thing that we want to make sure any proposed fee change does. This, based on 2024 data, does cover our budget and leave a little bit of room in case there's a reduction in total values in the future or any other changes. So that's where we felt confident we could give people serious reduction in fees while still covering budget, which was a big win-win, we thought, when we looked at the numbers. Now, just again to kind of give some background around how we originally arrived at this fee. And when we first came before the board, we had an approach that we were hoping was going to check out with actual data, and we've come back and now have some actual data. But the approach originally was looking at 2022 total actual values. We wanted to estimate what the nightly rate of a rental would be for any property within those categories. So we've got an estimate on the low end of what they could be charging as a nightly rate and on the high end, and we tried to build the fee to live within kind of that low and high kind of estimate. And so here before you, you've got this chart would look identical to what was originally brought before you. If somebody chooses the year-round rate, the highest rate, it's pretty close to what that high nightly rate would be. And if somebody chose the lower one, again, we're trying to find that sweet spot. So this is our existing fee. Again, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood kind of how we arrived at that. On our next slide, looks like we got a couple of these moved out. I'm sorry, it's actually the next one after that, Nicole. Proposed. Okay, here we are. So yes, this proposed is taking everything we just discussed, the same approach, but it's changing those percentages. So as you see there, the year-round is now a 0.04%, and the otherwise limited is at a 0.02%. Oh, yes, proposed, there we are. So right here, again, the fee that somebody would charge is going to be lower than what was previously there. It's still falling within that original approach of, we're close to their estimated nightly rate. I think a big challenge that we face with this is a property that is assessed somewhere in the $10 million range, right up in this area. Their nightly rate is significantly higher than really anywhere you'd see. But we really wanted to be equitable with those on the lower property value scale. And so this reduction does give them a substantial decrease. It still does give a decrease to those that are, 5, 10 million. But that's the challenge of kind of the landscape we've got, right? The business decisions of a property up here are going to be significantly different than those in the Crystal or further down valley, but we're trying to find something that can kind of thread that needle. So I'll take a pause here on just this new approach and the percentages we've got and see if there's any discussion from the commissioners regarding this kind of new method.
I don't see any questions.
My question
Go ahead, Greg.
would just be, how does this fit with the range of actual properties that we have? Where we have like 80 units in the county, 75 or 80, and what does that look like? Where are most of these properties? At the lower end or the middle or the top, or is it widely, evenly distributed? I guess I don't know if I saw that.
No, so we've got a chart further along to show properties within the different valuations, what that would mean to their specific fee. But I think if you're asking generally where do we fall, it's a pretty wide range. I mean, we don't have a high concentration of properties valued under $1 million. I'd say that's a handful. Majority of them are $1 million plus, and even more so are $5 million plus of our current SDR licenses. But yeah, you've still got, some that are under 400,000 that we're trying to make sure that fee works for them, but also works for the properties that are valued, 10 million plus. So.
And the nightly rates you think are within that range, or are these generously low?
I think for those properties under 3 million, yeah, it's fairly close from what we've seen to verify. I think it's those properties that, again, are above kind of that 5 million mark, where they have additional services that might not be offered on the, smaller properties, where if you add in butler, chef, maid, all of those on top, that nightly rate does become larger than what we've
Right.
projected here. But, it's difficult to build that into some type of estimate because it's not offered on everyone, but some of those higher end properties tend to have that.
Interesting, thank you.
Yes. Okay.
We can move on. Thank you.
So another change or new classification that we're discussing here, and some of these changes are property or resident occupied properties, right? So a resident occupied property, we believe, has a lesser impact because they might be doing some of those services, again, where somebody else might be bringing an FTE in. So in the cases that it's an owner occupied and they're only renting out part of their house and not the entire house, we do want to create a new category. That category is essentially going to mimic everything we have, but just divide the fee in half. So those percentages at the top aren't any different. Whatever that end result would be, just divide it in half, and that's what we're going to do. We had originally discussed, is there a way that we need to measure the amount of property and relate it back to the assessed value? And that just became very complex. We figure if it's owner occupied and there's part of a home being rented out, we'll just keep it simple, divide that by half, and that's going to be the fee there. So this is a new fee option, right, that we didn't previously have, and we'll see, if passed, if owners take advantage of it, and if there's a huge demand in this, great, we might have to revisit fees. But this is another new one we just want to see.
Go ahead, Greg.
I just want to point out that a lot of people, even in the lower end, probably have housekeepers that come and service the places. And so I don't know if just being resident occupied really is going to make a difference in the number of service people that are taking care of the unit. So I'm wondering if are those fees too low in that regard, if they're still creating the same number of jobs?
Can I jump in? We really only have one or two of these in the pool that they're just renting a bedroom. I think they're both up the Crystal.
That take care of it themselves?
And we don't collect that information, but just seeing that they're just doing one bedroom, they're on site, and we can verify that's accurate on their listing. This seems like a kind of straightforward way to accommodate that
I'm just
reduced
thinking
use.
that this is like a loophole. If you can get your fee cut in half by saying that you do it all yourself, I guess, is this going to create a loophole?
It's not so much as the services, it's more about, from the beginning, they didn't feel it was fair to have their entire property based on that fee. So, we're only renting a room.
Got it.
But I see your point. I don't know if we took that into account, the servicing of it, when we were looking at this.
That's
We were
what I
just-
saw. but-
Yeah, that's a good point and something to consider.
Patty.
Two things. She kept flipping the term resident occupied and owner occupied. So is it owner occupied or resident?
And the way we would track this on the listing sites is they call it partial unit. So if someone came in, paid a partial unit fee, and then later flipped it to full unit, we would catch that.
No,
And
no,
we
I'm
would
saying the
enforce on it,
definition-
but it's defined as partial unit.
But he used the term resident occupied and owner occupied.
I think we would use owner occupied as the term, yes.
And how do they sign an affidavit or something that says they actually live there? We've been having that issue with properties across the county right now.
Yeah.
Well, so as Nicole's mentioning, we have a monitoring website, Rentalscape, that are looking at all active listings on all of the different websites. And so they are able to report back data to us. If the STR license is issued and only states 2 bedrooms of the 5 bedrooms they have, if any of their listings conflict with that, then it would note it as, full
Pop up.
versus partial. And so that's how we're able to verify when we issue the license that what their listing is verifying, tying back to that.
So we're trying to come up with an accurate way of accurately tracking. Okay, and the other thing was with Greg's point, did we ever look at services generated as far as our fees? ever since we created this program?
That's going to be covered under the impact fee study, which the board approved us mobilizing
Right, the 200,000.
in October. Right, so we're working.
That's what I thought.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you gotta
So,
just talk.
We are working on drafting that RFP and proceeding with interviews.
Right.
So I would maybe save that for when we do a
Right,
work
right,
session with
okay.
them.
I knew we had talked about it, I just wasn't
Yeah.
sure where we were. Thanks.
Only that if we're gonna offer the discounted fee, can we ask them to identify that they're owner occupied in their advertisements? Just say, if you'll tell us in your ads and your listings that you're owner occupied, you may qualify for this fee. Otherwise, you're not. Otherwise, we're gonna assume you're not. I'm just thinking that'd be one way for everybody to know what the deal was and be straightforward about it,
Or
if
some
that makes
proof.
sense.
I think that would be good when I do the evaluation of the application, that they have to have some proof that it's just a single
Right,
room.
and they
owner
advertise it that way too. I
And
think any
advertisement.
listing could just say that, you're gonna be living in my house with me, versus this is our, rental unit. Thank you.
Well, and I guess I'll jump on this, how does this work? Cause it's, we're looking at less than half a year is the max, right? So it could be owner occupied 6 months out of the year, and then they're renting it the other 6 months out of the year. How does that interact here?
They would just pay the full fee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in that scenario, I mean, if they've got 5 bedrooms and they're living there and they report 5 bedrooms, well, we know that's not owner occupied because you're providing all of your bedroom count as available to be rented. Whereas if they just say 3, that's a pretty quick indication. And then when we're monitoring that, if you see 5, well, that's a discrepancy. Then they lied to us in the, licensing process. We know, hey, you're not owner occupied because you're providing all of those bedrooms as available to rent. So that's kind of, what they're reporting on the application and how we're verifying it when they're actually live listings.
Okay. And then, sorry, did you have an?
I was just gonna add that there's not that many that are
Sure.
owner, there's
Yeah.
just a handful of the 80 or 90 that we have so far. We're still accepting new ones for 2025. But same with the ag, there's 2 or 3 ag properties that are using STRs. The home occupied are just 2 or 3, and they're up the crystal. So we're not looking at a big, I guess we have to question whether we're making this change just for those few properties.
And how would an ADU get treated under this?
Well, it would be the same. I mean, that would be a separate,
CDUs are not allowed to be
well, no,
short-term
she
rented.
said ADU.
Oh, yeah.
We don't, the definition is caretaker dwelling unit in
okay.
the code. And they're covenant restricted to a 6-month minimum lease agreement. And so we've caught some of those applying for licenses in the process and enforced on them.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate that. Other questions on this?
Nope.
All right, let's keep going, thank you.
So the next couple slides, we'll just take everything we've discussed here.
Should I go to the next
Yeah,
one?
I think it's the next one. Everything we've discussed and look at some actual properties. So this is an example of a property in the Crystal River. We are comparing the 2022 total actual values versus 2024 total actual values, and then the reduced percentages for whichever tier they would select. So you're seeing that in most cases they're saving anywhere from $50 to $100. Which again, I think for somebody in this category, this type of assessed property, that's substantial money off their annual license fee. And so we feel that that is a win. That again gives them the flexibility to rent it half a year, rent it 20 nights to cover property taxes, whatever their decision is, but saving them a little bit of money to be able to put back, to whatever they desire. And when everybody's reviewed that, we can move to the next one and just trying to show for a property then in Red Mountain what that would also look like. So here again, all properties would receive a reduction because updating to the values and the reduction percentages. A property in Red Mountain can see anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000 reduction in their fee, depending on where they're choosing. Which again, substantial reduction for a property in this valuation, and then they can take those funds and decide where they want to spend that. So the last chart that I'll just bring up for my piece is when we looked at the 2024 total actual values and tried to group them by the various categories, this is the average fee change that those tiers would see. Now, the way we derived the average was the proposed fee subtracted from the current fee they're paying, and that is the fee change, and then an average for those in the different groups. So somebody who has a actual value of $500,000 or less would see a reduction of $100. Somebody who's that $500 to $1 million sees about a $500 reduction, a little more. And then those properties that are above are seeing, closer to $8,000 to $3,000 on that last case of a property, $5 million and more. So everybody is going to see a reduction. Again, we tried to make it as equitable as we could for those different actual values, but we felt that this was a kind of the sweet spot at the moment. This is something we always review. With any fees we've got, making sure that those fees are covering budget. So if we see a change in practice in 2025, we'll be in front of you to discuss as needed, but we felt that this gives us enough of a cushion while still giving a substantial discount to everybody. And that is all on fees.
Any questions before we move on?
If I could
Yes, go ahead, Greg.
briefly, sorry. It sounds like the trend in short-term rentals is kind of declining. It doesn't seem like it's a growing thing anymore. Is that correct?
Overall.
Overall, everywhere.
Nationally,
It's kind
yes,
of
it's down.
surged and then it's kind of tapering off.
I think that the reports have come out that unless you're in that higher bracket, with all the fees and the taxes, it's not equitable for lower valued homes to do short-term rentals. A lot of people are opting not to do them. It's when you're in that higher bracket that you see the fees. That's just a national
Right.
average. Is that what you're seeing, Greg?
That's kind of what I thought I read in the
Yeah.
packet, but I just wanted to understand that. Thank you.
But
Can I get a pulse on, put my finger on the pulse of how the board wants to direct staff in moving forward with updating the fees?
Thumbs up on it. I think
Yeah, I think we're good.
I like it.
Is there a fiscal impact that has to go back to Connie, or basically it's a net neutral to budget for 2025?
So when we originally started the program, we had put a number of $300,000 as a revenue, and the expenditures were still trying to be understood. We've now since know with 3 years of the program what our expenditures are, so revenue does cover expenditures and leaves enough cushion, to Greg's point, in case some decide it's no longer business decision they'd like to continue in. If we see a reduction of licenses even more, we've still built that in, that we would be able to cover expenditures.
And then just the follow-up, sorry,
Go ahead.
would be, will you have additional conformants or new entrants to the program potentially that see the reduced fee and say, great, I'm on board?
I think in general they'll be more comply to apply, seeing that we're trying to make some adjustments to it, that our fees are a little bit higher than the other jurisdictions, and so maybe that'll encourage them to come in and apply for a license.
Thank you.
Can I just ask?
Yes, Patty.
I'm gonna kind of step outside of the issue, but what Jeffrey said about new people applying, they would still have to comply with the dates of operation of
Correct.
the short-term rental, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I wanna make sure we're not messing with that. Okay.
Yeah, we're not,
At least not at this time.
right, exactly.
Thank you.
And one more thing about the balanced budget, all the previous years of the budget
Speak up.
included 2 full-time equivalent staff people. 2025, we reduced that to 1 FTE plus portions of like Alex's salary and leadership salary. So the sort of expenses associated with the program have also declined.
And that, to me, is the most important part of reducing the fees, because our fee structure should match what we need to run the program in as fair and equitable way as we can.
Last thing.
You good?
Oh,
Yeah.
Direction to move forward on this? Yes,
I'm
Greg?
certainly ready to move forward. I just wanted to say, thinking about the number of units, 80 or 90 units, what would it cost to create affordable housing in 80 or 90 units? You know, compare that to the cost of what's been lost, perhaps. It's just kind of sobering.
Right.
And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as we're trying to tweak this system. You know.
And that could come in with impact fees, you know, when we go through this process, and where do we want to put those fees? And maybe it could, you know, affordable housing is definitely one place that other jurisdictions are putting those the taxes. We don't tax as a county, but the city does, and that's what Town of Snowmass Village puts all of their fees back into affordable housing. So that's something we can look at after we do the study.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, let's keep moving.
Okay, so these others are, some are administrative and others are code, but in general, we're waiting until we do the study before we make any changes. So the public noticing is administrative, and so we will be looking at, currently the public noticing is 15 days with just delivery standards, just regular mail. We are considering changing that to match the land use code of 30 days mailing. And so that's on public noticing. The enforcement program, we're continuing to do more enforcement with the third-party agency, and our recommendation is to, you know, continue prioritizing enforcement, which is what we've been doing with unlicensed activity, occupancy errors in the listing, and violations concerning minimum and max night stays, depending on where they're in that percentage of the fee. And then we're going to include specific enforcement consequences, which we haven't done any sanctions yet to this violation, but that's the next step, is when we do find violations to issue sanctions.
Did you have a question, Greg?
Yeah, previous page, second topic. Send cases with objections go directly to the BoCC versus going to the
Hearing officer.
SCR staff.
Hearing.
Explain. So who actually sees it? Is Kelly going to get a call, or is it going to be who gets the call? Kara?
Text is better for me personally.
Yeah, I don't know if I think that may just
We
really
don't
be
have a hearing officer for short-term rentals, and last year you heard a couple of cases. So right now, I think until we do that study determining on
how often.
Yeah, how often.
Yeah.
Right now we're not encouraging people who don't meet the minimum. It's the number one thing that prohibits people from getting a license is the rental history. So basically, you know, if you don't have history between 2017 and 2022, you can't get a license. And previously, we've been encouraging people, you can appeal to that. But because we heard the two cases, we're not sending anything to the BoCC at this time, until we do that study. So.
And so it would go to our clerk. I'm just trying to. I want to make sure it's a well-oiled machine that receives these things, just so they don't get lost, or it's up to the whim of the vice chair, who's, you know, because the chair is away. Yeah. When you say
So
to
our
the
public
BoCC, who do they
noticing
go to?
document that gets mailed to the neighbors has instructions of if they
Who
have
to call.
comments or objections, and that would mobilize this process.
And it goes to our office rather than one of us.
Or it goes
It's
to
direct.
all of us, because we are a board of 5.
The objection would go to Jeanette, because the first line of
Okay.
defense
Just wanna make sure.
for staff is that
That's
the
not our
objecting
job.
party and the applicant could possibly work it out
Right.
themselves, and if not, then we would escalate it.
Got it.
And then this is just clarifying who that approval body would be in the case of an objection,
Thank
and
you.
that would be the BoCC.
Just wanted to make sure. Like, you know, how easy to drop that ball would be, you know, so, okay.
Okay, go to, and then enforcement.
We just went over that. Unless you had any questions about
And
enforcement.
Sure.
And I apologize, I got your summary, your 5 points, which were different numbers than my 5 that
Oh,
I
right,
already read
yeah.
about the eligibility period, so thank you. I'm like,
There
I
were
don't
some
see that right,
changes.
because the numbers were, you guys were seeing if we were on our toes.
That's right. Thank you for noticing that, yeah.
Thank you.
So-
Sorry, I have a
yeah.
question about the enforcement. So Will you come back to us with what the enforcement consequence will be?
Yes, so the, some of these, a lot of this would require a code amendment. So like the public noticing elements, well, we talked about the fee first. That would come back to you in a fee ordinance. That would be a discrete approval document for you. And then we'd also come back to you with code amendments. Inside those code amendments, we would clarify the public noticing based on this discussion, the consequences for enforcement, clarifying the review body when objections happen. All that would be baked into a code amendment. And including the one you specifically asked for in terms of like doubling the license fee.
And what is the interaction like with the hosting platforms? Like, is there any communication that goes to them about an enforcement action relative to the advertisement for the unit?
Well, when we see a violation, whether it's false advertising or they don't have a license, then we create a case, a code enforcement case, and we send out notice of violation. And I'm the person that they speak to about that and how to, correct those. And then, it's the normal process that they do for land use.
So it's not going to Airbnb to say we have this person's in violation, they need to take this down.
No, Airbnb, no, those platforms really don't care. I mean, they don't have any enforcement issues. It has to be on them. Now, if we do notice any like false advertisement or fraudulent, those are reported to Airbnb and VRBO and we have found several of those, especially when you're in a higher end environment.
Like houses that shouldn't be rented that are being offered for rent?
Yes, yeah. And it's funny because, well, it's not funny, but the monitoring platform that we use, Rentalscape, they don't really have any enforcement rules. Anything that if we do notice fraudulent activity, we report it to Airbnb and VRBO, and they have to. And then it's on the owner too. It's like, we're letting them know that there's fraudulent activity on their account, and you should probably take steps to make sure that they're not posted any
Rectify
longer.
or pull it.
Right.
Thank you.
So number 4 is about the minimum and maximum night stays. We're going to hold off on making any overall changes, but Jeffrey, we did change and loosen the restrictions for Redstone from 100 and we increased it to 180 nights from 120, and then the minimum nights went from 4 to 2. And we're going to hold off until we do the impact study to make any other changes to that.
I'll just note, I think this is an area of interest that Francie continues to have. She didn't give me any specifics beyond that.
Okay, yeah, we can look at that. Again, going back to why we did the minimum and maximum was to reduce the traffic and the services and things like that. So less impact maybe in Redstone because it's more seasonal out there. So then the application and the requirements and process, again, we're going to wait until we do that to make any changes, but we're going to discuss, or they're going to look at, whether we want to change that period of licensing from 17 to 22. That is the biggest. It is accomplishing to keep the numbers down if that's the goal of the program, and I think that's the whole idea of the impact study is to find out, what is our overarching goal of this program? What do we want to achieve for the community? And then just the license period. Do we want to move to? I think we did agree that we did want to move to a 2-year licensing. So we can come back with those with that recommendation versus a annual, as long as they're in good standing. And this is the summary that you have in front of you, which we just went over.
Okay,
And
do I
then-
have a thumbs up from board members to move these forward to fee ordinance and code updates?
Yeah, I look forward to seeing the results of the impact
Yeah.
study.
And as code updates, these would get referred out to the caucuses, is that right? Great.
And then, speaking of it, we just wanted to bring this up because I know you received it. The Woody Creek Caucus would like to change it, to prohibit it, but at this time, we're not gonna make any changes, to that. The code supersedes anything in the caucus.
And then the other three topics that the caucus brought up we're really addressing in these code amendments. So just, we're mostly aligned with Woody Creek Caucus, other than their overlay idea to restrict the short-term rental licenses.
Mhm.
And should we stop sharing?
Okay, any further questions for staff? I think you have a thumbs up on us with the
Okay.
input we've given to move these
Thank you
forward.
all.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Do you know when we would expect to see these? Just curiously, a couple months?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you.
All right, moving ahead of schedule, which might be good because
Yeah,
legislative updates always take longer than we give them.
exactly.
Hi, Levi. Yes, I think we're ready. Come on up and set up as you need.
Awesome. May I be promoted?
How you doing? How are things down in the General Assembly?
Things are awesome as always. Things are broke
Yeah.
at the General Assembly.
Well,
That's it, Gideon? He's leaving us?
Got him so well trained, he doesn't even talk.
will we see you tomorrow? Yeah.
I agree with everything. The only thing is, I think it's important to change
Did I
it
just
from
share the
15
whole
days to
screen
30
last time?
days,
Is that what I did?
Because the way mail service around here is, sometimes it takes 10 to 15 days to get something that was mailed in Aspen, so I think it's important. So I agree with that.
And US Postal Service is about a year, isn't it?
Yeah.
Screen, right?
I mean, they can't get staff, so sometimes it takes you 2 weeks to get a letter. 30 days.
Stop doing
I
that.
know last year I think I got returned Christmas cards in June.
Oh,
Got getting your ballots in
Like
the middle of
bad
the next voting year.
This should just work, right?
Okay, welcome.
Awesome. All right, good afternoon. Levi Borst, Management Analyst. I only had 30 minutes, but it looks like I've got a little more than 30 minutes. So
We're in
I
and
think
ear to
I think
ear.
we can give you some more time.
probably
Yep.
keep you until tomorrow. Great. So the legislative session just opened January 8th, and at least as of yesterday, there have been 140 bills introduced. So that's, I don't know how to feel about that. I think last session we ended up with 750-ish. So if we got 140 in the first week, then we're either on track to destroy that, or it was just a splash of everybody's first 5 bills.
I think they have a cutoff date, right?
Mhm.
Like sometime in March.
Yeah, that's a lot of time to introduce a lot of bills.
It does.
So depending on who you get your information from, $670 million budget shortfall up to $1 billion, it just sort of depends. The general rule or statement that I've heard from the JBC is they've gone back to every department and said, you're not cutting enough, cut more, and come back to us. It sounds like it's just Hunger Games, it's a bloodbath. So with that, they're only allocating potentially $0 and up to $5 million for new spending. It's obviously hard to authorize too much new spending when you're cutting so much existing spending. So when we met last, a few weeks ago, we had plus or minus 35 interim committee bills. And these are the bills that I've seen so far that have gone from interim and been introduced. So there's a link on each one of these, and I think we've talked about them kind of all the last time we met. So I don't want to bring any of them beaten into the ground. The financial assistance for county jails, I don't know if you had a chance to see that on the tracker, but it's kind of interesting. Could be applicable with our jail remodel or new construction or whatever we decide to do going forward. So there could be some money available in terms of grants for funding county jails. So this is just renaming the Courthouse Assistance Cash Fund to include jails. Sadly, I think there's only about $3 million in that fund, and I think last year there were $3.9 million in requests. So some requests get unfunded, but it's promising that we could still apply. Communication rights for persons in custody. I spoke with Dan Fellon about this, and he seems to believe that we already do all of these requirements. So it's actually not going to create any undue burden on us that we're not already doing. I think his only concern would be kind of a timeliness of those communications. He's worried that if somebody shows up at 2 a.m. and there's one jail deputy working and they demand to talk to their lawyer right then, how much of that do we have to accommodate? Otherwise, no heartburn over that one. Artificial intelligence to fight wildfire, and we spoke a little bit about this last time. A $7.5 million fiscal note, so it might not really matter what we think or what kind of an opinion we have. It's going to be a hard sell, I think. Of course, with California's current situation, I think anything that involves wildfire or fire mitigation probably gets a second look. And the same with detection components for wildfire mitigation. This is graduated. The fiscal note is $1 million the first year, $2 million the second year, and $3 million the third year. Let's see, landowner immunity for emergency access. I think this is fairly straightforward, right? To indemnify landowners who provide emergency access for the sake of fighting wildfires. That seems like a good thing. Prescribed burns. Kind of the same thing. CCAT supports this. Increase the maximum number of transportation planning regions. So I've got a bill tracker, a couple slides down the line, and we can see some notes and things that are included in here. I just wanted to flash on ones that have been introduced from the interim committees. Telecom facilities and local government permitting, and the vulnerable road users. I'm sorry Francie's not here. That's her favorite one. All right.
Sure, she'll have plenty of time in the session to weigh in.
For sure. So I also provided an attachment to a draft for barriers to pet-friendly affordable housing. And this hasn't been introduced yet, but I thought it's an interesting concept. I think it has a requirement for any affordable housing that receives DOLA funds to allow for pets. One or more domestic pets. And so I think that's part of the question here is, what is the definition of a pet? I think some of our friendly counties in Boulder and Larimer are concerned that the definition of a pet is so wide that you could drive a truck through it. It's anything that's not for commercial
Ride an elephant
use.
through it, Levi.
Right. That's, sorry. Only if it's not for commercial purposes. Yeah, so I think that's one concern. And, I forgot a capitalization. And then also to receive the affordable housing tax credit, the property or the person claiming that credit is required to allow the renter to keep one or more domestic pets. So I'm not sure to what degree this would potentially apply to APSHA. I'm not sure that APSHA is receiving a lot of DOLA funding. And I don't know off the top of my head if they're claiming an affordable housing tax credit. I'm sure that you all have spent more time on those boards.
Do you know if this is retroactive? I mean, they currently have, APSHA has two low-income housing tax credit projects. Those tax credits are administered by CHAFA at the state level. They're old. I mean, they've been around for decades. So I don't, and I mean, currently the APSHA rules require acceptance of emotional support animals and animal, assistance animals. So I guess I would wonder if this is retroactive. I would imagine that ours and city and other future housing might involve DOLA funding. So that is that. Yes, Patty.
I think if it goes further, there's a lot of definitions that are not clear, but I don't think we need to spend time on now, but if it starts to get any traction, like weight restrictions of a pet animal. What happens if my dog gained 20 pounds? So I have to get rid of her there? I mean, seriously.
You'd be shamed by your vet.
No, seriously. She was underweight when we started, but she was still, exceeded the restriction. But, so those kind of things that I think we need more clarification on moving forward. And the dangerous breeds, well, people think my dog's dangerous because she smiles and they think she's snarling, I think there's just a lot more to vet if it goes further.
Sure.
Greg?
I agree.
Kelly's point's really good.
I agree with Patty completely. It's like, yeah, we need to know more. Would there be a requirement there be a pet deposit or vary the rules? What are the ground rules? If people follow the rules, the pets are great. And if they have a pet deposit, the landlord is covered. So it's possible this doesn't have to be such a big deal. And I support pets. I knew people who had an iguana who lived in their boiler room for.
We had one that used to walk down the street.
Right, yeah, exactly. If you want to have your iguana, that's fine, as long as it doesn't eat somebody's,
Doesn't bite.
dachshund.
Do HOAs retain the authority to set rules on pets in this?
It's not addressed.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
See,
that's
so
kind
the builder of the housing might comply with one thing, and then the HOA may come in and say, this is what you're
Yeah.
gonna do.
Yeah.
I have to say, given what has happened in the last 24 hours in law and politics, this seems so,
trivial.
yes.
Yes.
But anyhow, that's just an aside.
This is
Thank
where
you.
the important work happens.
Do they have pets in the White House?
No, I guess they don't.
The new family.
So I didn't see anything about it being retroactive. I think it's just tax credits going forward and new projects that receive DOLA funding, but that may or may not matter. I think CCAP had a discussion last week about, do we care enough about this to keep it on our active monitor list or not? So I'm going to keep it on my list just to track what happens with it, but if there's not a ton of energy behind it, I won't worry too much about it unless something drastic happens.
Thank you for that update. You moving?
Keep you moving?
I think that we all concur with Levi's. If there's anything he finds really offensive to bring back to us, otherwise this is sort of a monitor.
You need me to go down and testify about dogs and cats, I'm there.
Iguanas.
I can't wait.
Iguanas,
Riding an elephant.
cheetahs.
Yeah,
Okay.
I highlighted a bunch, especially when we need to fiscally because of where the state's budget is right now. But some of them like regulating childcare center fees, those kind of things.
Yep, that's the
super
next.
to follow because what does that mean? And yeah, but it's a great. If you compare the notes of all of them, it's a great first blush. See where we go from here.
Yep, I'll get to that slide 2 slides from now that has a list of all these in a little more user-friendly format.
Okay.
So the Yes in God's Backyard bill, I think I put a draft of this. It's concerning the promotion of residential development on qualifying properties, affectionately being referred to as YIGB, Yes in God's Backyard. If you read through that draft, you can kind of see some guardrails about how long the institutions needed to be in existence, how long they needed to own the property, and then some kind of loose guidelines on what sort of administrative review would be required for those folks to develop housing on their existing properties. So I think in concept, I see where this is going, and also there are a few different concerns that have popped up. I think it mentions everybody who uses this or would use this, they're required to comply with the Fair Housing Act and who they rent to and their landlord-tenant practices and things like that. I think there's some concern that the First Amendment freedom of religion could conflict with some of that, and so I think we wanted to make sure there would be some guardrails about people essentially not just developing property on their church and then only selling to people who go to their church, or that they have the freedom of assembly with, or however that looks. So I think that's a concern. And there's also nothing in there about affordability. So you can imagine a scenario where somebody would buy a 600-acre ranch and go through an administrative land use approval and build a bunch of mansions and sell them for $10 million each. And so I think that's another concern that's in the draft that CCAT and other organizations kind of talked about. And then finally, of course, the administrative review process is all that we would be allowed to do under this draft legislation. So I think there's concern that our planning process might lose some teeth if it's just an administrative approvals process.
Patty?
Yeah, what about the federal law? Isn't it RULAPA? The religious something, it's where you have a church and you have land and you can pretty much do whatever you want. We learned a lot of lessons about that with the Grace Church in Emma. So you might want to, yeah, it's another one that gets thrown into this at some point maybe.
Interesting. I don't know about that.
Yeah. Eva, have you gotten input from our land use department? Suzanne or?
I have not.
otherwise? I might suggest forwarding this on to them, because I can think of at least one property where I would have a little concern about how this might be applied.
Mm-hmm. At least if that property sells, then there's the 5 years that you have to have owned the property. I don't know.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, so the bill tracker is something that I printed to PDF and then attached in your packet. Let's see if I can make this work. Huh. Thanks, Abby.
Does that work?
Yeah.
We ever defined vulnerable roads?
I think it's
Vulnerable
the user.
The user is who's vulnerable.
A vulnerable road user, but that makes it, is that defining user or is it defining a road?
The
Because it
user.
says vulnerable road user.
It's the user.
So
I think
who's
it's the
vulnerable
user.
here?
I think it's the cyclists and the pedestrians. They're more vulnerable than the.
I was interpreting this to be, field mice all the way up to moose as well.
I don't think it's a wildlife. Maybe it's the elephant.
Yeah, the elephant's less vulnerable, but
Or more, depending upon if it has ivory or not.
And so
I mean, we've had a fair number of pedestrian accidents on the road in our community over time. So
We got some great stories
it would be good
of
to
Aspen
watch.
Mountain, that's for sure.
And so I'll forward this presentation and the link should be active for all the updates. So you can click on it today, and then tomorrow it will be different with additions and revisions and notes. But just so you can kind of see the format, and if anybody, of course, these are all here in case there's any discussion to be had on any of these bills. You can see the bill number, title, description, bill subject. All the links should take you to General Assembly sites so you can read full bill text and fiscal notes if they're available. You can see sponsors and the next hearing date and time. Kind of a new year, new program, to see how it works.
Good reading, actually.
What's that?
It was good reading, actually,
An insomniac?
to think what people are thinking out there.
So something that I've added here are which one of our member organizations support or amend or whatever they might think. I still need to get, of course, the APA once we start getting down that road. I'd love to add all those thoughts here. So ideally, you can just go to this whenever and kind of take a look at comments. I put staff comments for bills that we've gotten them on. And then also check if Greg wants to testify for the dog bill.
Sorry, where did you link this?
It's in the presentation I'm speaking from now, and I'll just forward you the presentation or share it with you. Or I can share it with you now if you want to
I don't know.
respectively click on it.
The link would be great.
Yep.
That's all. Thank
Easy.
you. All right, any
Yeah, so I guess,
any of these that you want to continue to draw our attention to?
well, I think a few that were interesting, vegetative fuel mitigation. I may have already gone below that.
Lower.
Sorry, Jeffrey, did you?
It was lower, sorry.
Oh, thank you.
One down.
There you go. So a fire district can enact mitigation requirements on private land, and I think Here, it's an interesting concept, and there's some concern, as you can see on that note, about weed management programs, and if they overlap and if they contrast, who kind of gets the say? Is it a weed management program, or is it the fire district, or how does that shake out? But I think that's probably just a clarification in the language. I think anything that is going to have a 0 to low fiscal note and addresses fire could be a good thing. Income tax credit for eligible teachers, 1037. So this is just as simple as an income tax credit for licensed teachers. I think it's $500 annually for part-time teachers and $1,000 annually for full-time teachers. I think that's pretty small, but I think anything we can do to help on that front's probably a good thing. I don't know what the consequences are of chipping away at taxes we're collecting, but given our current problem.
Well, the problem's not what we collect, it's what we can keep.
Vulnerable road users. This is going to be a problem the entire session, isn't it?
I love it.
CCAT and CC4CA both level 1 support this. It's an opt-in at time of registration, and basically those funds go to support bike lanes and pedestrian-friendly things like that. So permissive, which is always good, and at the time of registration.
I think that's great.
And so would the adoption be on a county by county basis?
It would. Let's see, 1049 we already talked about. So that's communication rights. I think this is in committee tomorrow. He has a few concerns about timeliness and staffing logistics, otherwise no objections. The telecom facilities, I've sent that to Suzanne for a ComDev read on how this would affect us, and we're not entirely clear how it overlaps with the existing federal shot clocks on telecom facilities, so we just need clarification on that. Senate Bill 2. I'm sorry, this is probably nauseating if you're watching the screen while I scroll. So regional building codes for factory-built structures. If you had any time to glance at even the overview concerning the development of regional building codes that account for local, climatic, and geographic conditions. So I spoke with Jeffrey Erickson about what we're doing now, and he told me that we're not currently inspecting the structures at all. If they're pre-built somewhere else, they are inspected at the facility, and we only do inspections of the site-built components, like the foundation or utility hookups or whatever. So the legislation doesn't talk about what the actual regions are or who's in which region, but in talking with Jeff, he seemed to think anything that accounts for mountain conditions is going to be an improvement over what we have now. So when I first read that, I was pretty concerned, but knowing what I know now, I don't think I'm as concerned about it.
Patty?
Yeah, real quick. Just got a call from somebody. There's a factory-built modular they're trying to bring in, but it's come down to an issue about a sticker. We don't inspect them, but now we're saying you have to have a sticker or something from the state. The person who's trying to do this land use thing says, no, I don't. So I don't know if we could maybe find out where the stickering approval comes from and how it may or may not be impacted by this, or maybe we don't inspect them, but we're requiring somebody to somewhere. So I don't know all the minute details.
I think what it might be is we don't have building code around manufactured home.
But we're requiring something, and the owner of this modular is coming in and saying, you can't. So I don't know if this might, I don't know how, but be nice to get that cleared up.
Because doesn't the state do the modular home inspections now? So is this just the standard that the state is inspecting too, or does this create new inspection requirements for local governments?
Right.
Part of both. So
Or is a sticker enough that the person gets now enough? Would we have to do 2 layers or?
Right.
So
Yeah.
the way I read it, they would develop regions that would have different building codes. So if you're buying a modular home that's constructed in Sterling, they say, well, where's it going? It's going to Aspen. Okay, then here are the requirements. It's got to have a higher snow load and more wind resistance, whatever. And then, I guess you just have to determine beforehand if they're made to order or if you just build them all to the highest standard. That's a manufacturer kind of logistical problem. And then this legislation also allows the Division of Housing to authorize local inspection of those structures to the regional standard where they live, which is, I think, probably where we could be affected. I think if our building folks had a lot more structures to inspect than they were currently inspecting, they might put an undue burden on them.
Yeah.
So I think that's one
Suss
concern.
that out. Yeah, Greg.
Don't we have
And then
climate zones already in the state? So
We do for plants.
Well, for yeah, and I think they have them for houses too, or I thought there were, like, there's the mountain or the coldest temperature, like we're in the most extreme zone here for insulation requirements and snow load and things like that. And it seems to me that if they already have that, that's great. But if we have the ability to demand that from modular homes, so if somebody's bringing a modular home and it doesn't meet any of those standards, we're kind of defeating our own energy code purposes. So I don't know. It seems like we should be paying attention to that one and advocating for appropriate houses if they're coming in. Because I think modulars are great, and I'd love to see more of them, and I'd love to promote that, but they have to be up to standards. They can't be energy takes, for instance.
Yeah, I think that was something that Jeff mentioned, was that they're not being inspected currently to our energy code at all.
Well, that's shocking to me, actually. Actually, we're not doing that. That seems crazy. But I guess not too many come in, but we ought to be doing it.
I don't have a sense of how many come in, but I think it's not only residential, but if it was a modular for a school campus or something like that, I think it applies to all factory-built structures that come in. So just to your point, I don't have any idea what the number is.
I can imagine it growing, because if you can build, Jeff would know more about this, Jeffrey, but also if you can build a house elsewhere for much cheaper, truck it in and get it built on site in 2 or 3 months instead of 2 or 3 years, that would benefit all of us. But it has to meet our energy codes and our whatever else, codes that we have on that. So it just seems that we better do that.
I think there's a perception, maybe it's true in some places, that local codes are prohibitive to manufactured or factory-built structures, and so that's where the hang-up was in the delivery of these faster, cheaper, more efficient structures. Again, I don't know if that's local government is the enemy narrative coming out of some state offices, but I think that's what this is trying to address on the front end. So,
Jeffrey.
I would just add, Levi, I think the other thing that potentially, I have not read the bill in detail, would address is that there's parts of the state that don't have a building code. So this is another way of the state saying, okay, we're giving you a wildfire code, now we're giving you a building code, because you're more likely in parts of the state that don't have a building code to have a non-site built structure. So I think we'd be supportive of this. There's parts of the county we might, this would come into alignment with what Jeff has already imposed. I'm happy to read this one and give you more feedback, but happy that Jeff's commented on.
yep. Yeah, I didn't see anything that concerned me other than if we're suddenly asking Jeff and his team to inspect 1,000 units a month or something like that, which I don't think is happening.
Which CCI committees are you on again? Are you on local government, general government? I think you might be. This will come up there.
If I could,
Yes,
I
great.
remember this came up at CORE a few years ago when Fading West built a modular home factory over in Buena Vista. And everybody got so excited that, wow, maybe this week we can source modular homes there. But the guy who put the factory together had not contemplated energy efficiency, really, is what we were told. And a group of core board went over and talked to him and got to know, took the tour and talked to him about, gee, do you really want to build these in our neck of the woods? You might want to consider this. And I don't know what changed, but I think it was a really productive, and hopefully, that's where this is going, and that, it shouldn't have to cost that much more to build a house that makes sense for, energy efficiency and as well as structural, of course.
I think the one proposed for Rifle is building to mountain standard.
Better be. Is that, you mean habitats? Yeah, they better. Yes, Jeffrey, I can't recognize you, but Kelly might.
I would just add that if someone's going to do factory fab in Rifle, they should also consider not only what's in this bill, but also wildfire resiliency, which I think is an afterthought. I don't, I think I got a quick answer. Yes, it would be conforming, but that's we have terms for that in the business world. So.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I'm focused on energy. Jeffrey's focused on fire. That's good. That's good.
You need to meet both, folks.
We do, yeah. Not too hot or too cold, just right.
Precisely.
We've gone through 07.
And Levi, while I threw the fire spanner in there while you're scrolling, is there anything that actually addresses insurability? Because it seems like I know this board had conversations last year. Certainly, people calling up and saying, I've either lost or my insurance has doubled. Anything this year that's attempting to address both, really trying to address insurability?
So 2 bills that are alleged to be coming.
Yeah.
The first one is a wildfire mitigation modeling bill. It hasn't been introduced yet, so I don't have it on any lists. And ideally, this is going to be something that forces insurance companies to take into account mitigation efforts as they determine rates and insurability. And so currently, there's no way to guarantee that any mitigation efforts, either on the homeowner, the local, the regional, or the state level, are being considered in terms of those modeling matrices or not. And the second bill is an insurance coverage enterprise, and supposedly that's a fee on propane that subsidizes some, I think specifically hail damage on the Front Range, in order to make kind of the statewide insurability numbers just work better, because they have such a high incidence of hail damaged roofs, and then they replace the roofs and they get hail damaged again, and it just kind of is this cycle, and so it translates to the entire state. So those are 2 rumored bills.
Wait a minute. They're going to put a fee on propane to mitigate for hail. Where's the nexus there between propane
Carbon,
and
atmospheric
hail?
carbon, perhaps.
Well,
I don't know.
I think there's a bigger buck somewhere else than from propane, but I mean.
All I have are my chicken
Interesting.
scratch. I haven't seen anything in writing yet.
We're getting desperate looking for funds, and
So-
so we're going to have to be creative, I guess. Interesting.
Yes, Jeffrey.
We'd love to read a draft of the first one.
I would
as a
love to see
board.
one.
Okay.
I haven't seen one yet.
Do you know who the sponsor is?
Brown, Cutter, and Tatone, allegedly.
Maybe we can email them and ask them for their draft.
I mean, that's, to be honest, and I'm not speaking for the board, that would be the most interesting one of the list that's been reviewed so far.
Agreed.
So.
I'm sure there's some strategy in when they release that and watching what happens. Or maybe they're just having trouble getting the draft right. I really don't know. Let's see. I guess we've covered the other fire bills, or the fire bills that have introduced so far. The increased prescribed burns, CCAT voted to support that on a level 3, but acknowledged that it might be somewhat symbolic just because of the fiscal note and the lack of money, but it's something I think we still want to signal that we support and get the chance. I thought senior housing income tax credit extension is an interesting bill. just extends the income tax credit to income qualified seniors. I think there's a caveat that they've not also applied for the homestead exemption. The only downside is a potential $36 million loss in revenue. I think that's an estimate, not knowing how many people would continue to claim the tax. And I'm sure there's an easier way to do this. Sorry while I stumble through this.
That's good.
Ranch property tax clarifications. This just kind of extends the definition of ranch in terms of who can qualify for an agricultural tax credit. So it sounds like a language cleanup bill to me, where they're saying not only keeping livestock, but also raising livestock, and there's some kind of distinction that would afford the agricultural tax credit to more properties than currently get it. So of course the downside again is not knowing how many properties qualify, what is the net decrease in tax collected based on that.
That could possibly be anyone with a horse could qualify, or anybody with a chicken.
Yeah, and their employee housing unit as their pet.
Yeah, chicken can't be a pet and get the ag tax credit, ranch tax credit, sorry.
I think I skipped an important one. Senate Bill 20. Landlord-tenant law enforcement. So this would extend the enforcement ability for landlord-tenant violations to the district attorney, or not the district attorney, the county attorney in each county. So currently the Attorney General has this authority, and they're looking to extend it to the county attorney's office. So this has some things, I think, designed at livability of affordable housing units that just fall into disrepair, and there's no teeth or any enforcement to basically repair those properties to a livable standard. So depending on who you ask, some counties really like this because it gives them some teeth to force landlords to keep their properties up and up, and others are really concerned at how far that goes, with people coming to their county attorney with landlord-tenant complaints on civil and criminal matters both. It could end up being quite a long list to an overworked office as it is. So I think that's interesting to see where that goes. CCAT's monitoring. I sent this to Rye last week, and we haven't had a chance to catch up yet.
That could necessitate hiring another attorney.
True, and it's written to be permissive, so there's nothing that says we would have to do this, but I think the risk is if we have the ability to do this and we choose not to, then it's probably kind of a bad look if someone says, hey, you could help me with my landlord-tenant situation, and you're choosing not to, and it's just kind of ugly.
Can you go into a little detail, if you can, on 021 on the
Sure. So that requires registration at the time of purchase or transfer of OHVs. And so basically be a lot like the way we register cars.
how is that different from today?
I think they're required to have the Parks and Wildlife stamp to be used on certain public properties. But if you're not using it on a public property, I don't think it's required.
Can I
Yes.
just thinking about the way we restrict use of county roads. We've kept ATVs and motorcycles off of our, county roads because they're unlicensable. If this extends licensing to them, is it the same thing as a highway registration licensing? If we did, it may just completely upend our prohibition on recreational off-highway vehicles on our county roads.
I read it to not be the same thing. So I
Okay.
read it to be separate. It's a separate registration that's, honestly, it looks like a way to make some money off the sale and transfer of OHVs. I reached out to the sheriff's office to see if they thought this provided any information advantage for abandoned or crashed or investigative tools, and they seem to think it would provide very little in terms of that benefit, but it would drum up a little bit of money.
What about safety? Because when you register, you have to check off, the checklist of safety issues, turn signals, whatever.
Well, because it's not highway or street legal and it doesn't require a driver's license to operate, I don't think
But you
those
still have
things
to
apply.
register it, there's kind of a,
It's just a moneymaker.
Moneymaker.
It'd be
We
worth,
need to have this
so if
new
I take
sticker.
the registration off my car, my 8-year-old granddaughter can drive it, right?
pull the
probably
plates
a
off
little
and she can
different.
drive it all she
Yeah.
wants.
Pull the plates, yeah. We'll put the girls in the car.
I know, mine would be like, yeah, let's give this a try.
Well, you can. There might be consequences, but
Yeah. To a lot of people.
to everybody else.
Could you explain the difference between applying artificial intelligence to fight wildfire and the artificial intelligence wildfire mitigation? They were so similar that I couldn't figure out what the difference.
Yeah, well, the biggest difference is the fiscal note, 1 million versus 7.6. One requires a public-private partnership. It's pretty murky.
Kind of like what we've got going now.
It's a lot like what we've got going now.
If they both go through.
Yeah. I think our opportunity for advocacy on this is perhaps lower insurance rates for communities that have such services.
I'd like to see that on many counts, not just on artificial intelligence, like building codes.
Yep. I think we're gonna get a lot smarter about that.
I do, I want to go back to this property tax on ag thing.
The definition
I
of
just,
ranch,
the bill is 2 pages. It's very generic.
is that the one with the definition of
Yeah.
ranch?
And it wants to change expand
29.
taxation from just grazing of livestock to grazing and raising of livestock, as well as the definition of livestock to be expanded to include but not limited to chickens and pigs and such. So we have good relationships with all 3 of these sponsors, and right now this seems like real loose to me. They don't give a concrete definition on what livestock is and what the activity of raising livestock is.
Where's Belton from?
He claims to grow up in Basalt, but he criticizes Picken County mercilessly, but lives out on the Eastern Plains.
Yeah, everybody who gets washed out of
He's
here
a nice
does
guy,
that.
but he's an ag
Yeah,
dude
I
from
think
the
that's
Eastern
one
On the
to
shoulder.
follow. I mean, it's like Francie always gives her position on horses.
Right.
Why
I
are
just-
horses not considered?
I mean, like the city of Denver allows livestock raising in backyards. Like you can have a goat and chickens, So I just, there's a broader scope here than
Yeah,
that I think that could allow a lot more property to get captured as agricultural property that we may not support.
if I put a
Anyone's
pig in
second
my
house.
trailer court lot, I would be,
Yeah, or
I tried to do that many years ago and my neighbors wouldn't let me.
if you had a
Seriously.
rooster in your high-end subdivision, it just lowers it all.
So like,
I don't like roosters.
we're seeing an application relative to some raising of animals and things like that. Could they qualify as an ag property
Oh, you
for
could
having
have-
some
sure.
goats?
Yeah. One chicken running around the
I'm raising
property.
dogs and cats.
Anyway, maybe forward
in the
this
pool.
to the assessor's office for some input to us, please. And then I'm just gonna shoot a quick note to the sponsors and say, we have some
We need to learn
concerns.
more about this.
Yeah.
They could come talk to us about it if they
Yeah.
want.
Yeah, I guess if I sell eggs, then,
Oh, yeah, you're a farmer.
right.
You know what I'm gonna.
Or are you a
we're already
rancher?
talking, or a rancher.
I-
Yeah, you're a
I
rancher.
qualify, that's all I know.
However you want to
Now, you
define
could,
it.
Yeah.
you could call your place the Chicken Ranch, but that may be a bad thing to call it.
Hmm.
Okay, sorry, thanks for going back to that.
Of course.
We have 10 more minutes. What else do you want our input on right now?
Exactly. I think that's where it came from.
Just a couple behavioral health crisis response recommendations. I think anything that we can do that supports kind of this space is a good thing, at least to learn more about it. I think this is a study bill as written. I spoke with Lindsay, who says it's benign and is working with their strategic planning folks to see what the impact would be locally. So that's one I would point out. And finally, the enforcement of federal immigration law.
Whew. Definitely a red bill there, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think
Can't imagine this will move in a Democratic assembly.
agreed. And so just on the far right is just kind of a quick synopsis of the timeline. In 2013, that Senate Bill 090 was repealed, and this would effectively repeal the repeal. So currently, I think when we did the welcoming community statement a few years ago, that still stands with the bill or with the statute language as it's written now. And I think if this were to pass, we would probably have some direct conflicts in what we have in our welcoming community resolution and the 090 if it should come back into effect. I mean, that's a pretty big if, but I think with the change in Washington, I think that's probably why we're seeing this. And maybe as an aside, I don't know if our president will issue another executive order similar to the one that he did in January of 17. And if so, if this board wants to consider revisiting the letter that we've already sent out a few years ago or not. But I guess that's kind of an aside.
Yeah, definitely one we need to keep an eye on.
I'm with you. I can't imagine this, especially getting through the House. I don't know that it'll get enough votes, but I haven't seen it assigned to committee yet, but I'll definitely keep an eye on it. And so those, I think, are all that I've got on the tracker currently. I've got a couple minutes. If there are any issues or rumors that you all have heard that I can do more research on, anything else that's come across your desk.
I was
Go ahead, Dave.
following there was the electric vehicle road tax that was talked about, was it last summer or maybe, and I saw it somewhere in here. I don't know where it is now. And it'd be fun to just keep monitoring that. I think if it's not punitive, it seems like it's a good idea if done fairly. As much as I don't want to have to pay more highway tax, I think it's a fair, as long as it's not a punitive measure, anti-electricity sort of thing.
I remember talking about it as a concept, and I don't know that I've seen anything introduced about that
I
just
thought I
yet.
saw it in here somewhere.
Yeah, it's in here.
Is it in this? I already forget.
Might be under one of these other.
Tiers.
I think it might have.
There it is. CCI Tier 1
Oh, right.
electric fuel charging station tax. No, is that it? No.
So I think it's a priority, but I haven't seen the introduced legislation yet.
Right, okay.
So the rest of these slides are just a revisit of the legislative priorities, something that you've already seen in the last meeting. So I just throw them in there in case there's any reference points. And it's a good flag, Greg. I'll keep an eye for that.
Kelly?
Yes, Pat?
Yeah, I do, you need to emphasize again, keeping an eye on the regulating childcare center fees because of our cost of living issues here and the cost for our childcare providers to provide childcare. I don't need, just to see how that might be taken into consideration. If they're gonna cap fees, we could lose more childcare providers.
That's Senate Bill 4. Is that the one you're talking about?
It's Senate Bill, 004.
Awesome.
So I just don't know which side it's got. The sponsors right now are all Democrats, so I don't know where their thinking is on that. So maybe something I need to pull up the bill and read what's being proposed.
And we've also got the opportunity to issue tax credits, property tax credits for areas of local interest from last year's legislative session. And that could be used to fund anything of local importance, like perhaps childcare.
And we would have to designate, say, a childcare facility as an area of local concern.
Mhm.
And then we could apply that It's not a lot, but it might help in some cases. But we also are looking into that, could that then apply for-profit childcare? Or what level of childcare facility is just be at home, which you already are not taxed as commercial. If you have an in-home childcare, your tax is residential. So there's a lot of creativity going on there too, we might wanna keep an eye on.
Sure.
Thanks, Levi.
Any other questions?
Just,
Yes, Greg.
last one, I'm just looking at the railroad maintenance projects. We don't have any active railroads in Pitkin County, but our neighboring counties do. And I'm wondering if this is of concern to them. County government's required to help railroads pay for maintenance without any discussion. That just seems like pretty back-asswards, especially if they're trying to promote rail. It just seems like, I don't expect us to have rail back anytime soon, if ever, but it'd be interesting to see what they're thinking if you're talking to anybody at Eagle or Garfield about it.
Yeah, I think
Maybe we could support them.
I think it's exactly that. I think it's when a rail company says, we need help maintaining this intersection and this crossing, and you have to give us money for it. And so this is designed to have the railroads pay for railroad safety projects instead of local governments.
Yeah,
Which makes a lot of sense.
interesting.
Yeah, I think that must be one that harkens back a long way back.
And maybe we should be thankful to have the railway, so we should all pay for all the infrastructure for
Right,
the railway.
exactly.
I know it's a real stress on budgets for
Boy, you can imagine.
some counties.
Especially when you get into those farming communities where
Yeah.
the rail runs through it and they don't really,
Doesn't
they
stop.
have those crossings, they don't
Doesn't
really have
even
any
stop.
benefit from the rail
Right.
anymore.
All
Good
right.
stuff.
I'll send you all the presentation, which will have the link to this bill tracker in it. And as you hear of anything, just please let me know and I can get it added and start following along.
Thanks, Levi.
Thank you.
Thanks, Levi.
Interesting.
Thanks for the extra time.
Oh, yeah.
Let me know when I have
I
to come
appreciate
down
your outreach to staff on
testify.
getting their input. It's always helpful.
I'm going to testify on behalf of pets.
Literally
do we
walking
get
down
new
my street
shades?
one day.
Yeah?
It was huge.
Whose was it? Do you
You
know?
fell out of somebody's window, automatic shades. Like window seat, you rolled out, a bunch of college guys.
Yeah.
Called animal control, they were like, excuse me, I'm like, there's like a dinosaur, I think it's in there.
Okay.
It's huge.
All right, folks, thank you, Levi, for your legislative update as the Assembly wrestles with new laws. Now we're moving on to discussion of our Pitkin County debt issuance policy and debt post-compliance issuance policy with our
So
fabulous
easy to understand.
finance experts.
Sorry, I'm trying to get don't do this Zoom
So
thing
Andrew,
very
here's
often.
which hat do you wear for this conversation?
I am supporting the finance director.
All right, let me just get this set up. All right, woohoo, figured it out. Thank you.
Please
so,
introduce yourself
yes,
to everybody.
I am Liz Woods. I am the finance director for Pitkin County.
Andrew Gus, Chief Financial Administrative Officer, Treasurer, and Public Trustee.
So we're here today to talk to you about two policies we would like to have your input on and approval of. And they are related to debt issuance and debt post-compliance issuance, or debt post-issuance compliance. Sorry, I have a hard time with that one. And we also thought it would be also a good opportunity to talk to you about debt issuance, since we have a debt issuance coming up, and kind of give you more details about
Just one?
that. At the moment. that we have approved for, so we'll talk through that. So why are debt policies important? There's a lot of different pieces to it, but a really big one on here is the credit rating. So every time we go out to issue debt, we have to go through a credit rating process, and having sound financial policies is a good indicator to the rating agencies that we have sound financial processes. And so having this policy in place will, help when we go to talk to those credit rating agencies in the future as we're getting those ratings done. The other thing that it can do is it can basically set some parameters around when we issue debt, so that there's not debt issuance for things that we shouldn't be issuing debt for, that we should either be paying for as we're going along, or that there is other financing sources for, things like that. So this kind of puts some parameters around that we can point to and say, hey, it's our policy to look at all other financing options before we get to debt, for instance, grants or other things, so that we have this kind of documented. It helps us create public trust, transparency, and accountability, because we have a very clear policy of why and when we issue debt. And then it kind of helps with our long-term financial planning as well, because we can look and see, if we have, we might have a lot of debt capacity right now, but we might have a lot of big projects, which is kind of the situation that we're in. And we have to make sure that we're kind of cognizant of the fact that we might need this debt capacity for future projects as well. So we have to kind of be cognizant of that, and that this policy should help with all that. So what is a debt issuance? We're going to go really basic here for people who are not as involved in this. But a debt issuance is when we either sell bonds, we get a loan, or we have some other financial instrument for a county project. It is typically used for large infrastructure projects, at least as far as how we do it, or acquisitions of property as well is the other thing. So. When we are discussing a large capital project, we have two options. One is pay-as-you-go, which basically means we have fund balance or some sort of other revenues that will help pay for the project. So a lot of our capital projects, we do a pay-as-you-go model. So when we do, like we talked about in the budget process for our road and bridges, a lot of that we're building up the fund balance and then we're spending it down. So that is a pay-as-you-go model. And then the other option is a financing tool of some kind. And we'll go into those different financing tools in just a second. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, when should you consider debt instruments? It's when the big thing that I want to highlight is there's a benefit to future users. Because if we have a project, so I'm going to do a hypothetical here. Let's say the landfill project was only going to get us 7 more years of life. Then, it's only people for the next 7 years who will get a benefit of using the landfill, so that we shouldn't necessarily issue debt to pay for just this 7 years, unless the debt is only for 7 years. So kind of it matches the length of the capital asset. So in our case, we're going to get a lot more than 7 years out of the landfill, but it's just something to consider that we don't want to have future users indebted for things that they no longer get use of. Anything else you want me to add on that one? So 3 key considerations for debt issuance, and I did put this into the policy, so it's actually written into the debt issuance policy. Equity, effectiveness, and efficiency. Again, the benefit of the item finance should be paid by those people who are using it. Effectiveness is that it actually, once the transaction's completed, it actually does what it's supposed to do. And then basically the costs and the future benefits are, again, there's no better competing alternative. So there's no grants, there's no other things that would be cheaper or a better way to use our funds.
And then I just point out, in many instances, that is actually also written into some either state statute or governmental accounting standards. For instance, that, an enterprise fund can only, use the revenues of the enterprise fund to pay for those debts. You can't use just general property tax funds. In the instance of the airport, only the users of the airport are paying for the debt for the airport, nobody else.
And it will be the same way with the landfill as well, that it's the users of the landfill who will be paying for the expansion of the landfill as well. Types of debt. So I did not list all the different types of debt because there are probably 30 of them. But the big ones that we tend to use is the general obligation bonds. That is the pledge revenue is the full faith and credit of the county. So that means that basically the property tax base is used. It can be used for any project. I will put a caveat there, though, that it shouldn't be used for enterprise funds, and that it also shouldn't be used for there are exceptions, but in general, it shouldn't be used for kind of non-core instances of the county. So things that are kind of core services of the county. There are exceptions. So open space and trails is kind of an exception, but again, they are, that's kind of, like I said, an exception, but I would say that typically you use GO bonds for core services. That has to be approved by Pickens County voters, and we are limited to 3% of the actual property tax valuation, and that gets adjusted annually. And then revenue bonds are specific to a revenue source, so it can be either like sales tax, or in the case of the landfill, the landfill fees. Case of the airport, it could be like the FBO revenue or their fees. So there's a couple sources. So, but it is set to one specific revenue source. The project should be related to that revenue source, and again, that has to be approved by all Pickens County voters. There is no limitation on revenue bonds other than limitations of like the revenue source. So
we spend all the money we don't have.
And then the last one is certificates of participation. This is also called a municipal lease, and that one is subject to annual budget appropriations, and it is not really considered indebtedness by Colorado state statutes. And so it can be used for any project technically, but it is usually used for buildings, essential buildings, and usually put up the building as collateral for the lease, the COP. And so that one is approved by the BoCC and does not go to the voters.
Patty.
So, thank you. Very clear. What general obligation bonds do we have out now?
Well,
before we move on from that, can I ask a generic question? I'm going to ask.
Yes, you certainly may. She's good.
Thank you. What other things can you put up as collateral? Can you put up land? Can you put up fleet? Can you put up a snowplow at the airport?
Typically, it's land or building. Mm-hmm. I can't say I've ever heard of a snowplow being used.
And you can
I
enter.
have to be in all kinds of financial trouble.
Generally, a highly depreciable asset like a vehicle is not going to be collateral for debt. Now, you could do a lease purchase agreement as a debt mechanism against vehicles if you wanted to spread out cash. It tends to cost you more because you lose both the small amount of investment income that we get as well as paying interest or financing charge on top of that. But it's not something that you could collateralize, for example, construction of a housing project or something. Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the municipal lease? I knew a guy who sold municipal leases for things like copiers. Is that a different type of lease where we wanted to buy a copier, we get someone else to finance it? That's a different category. Thank you.
Okay. You can answer Patty's question.
Your question later in the
Okay.
Yeah, can I get back to that one?
Oh, certainly.
I wanted to ask for an example
dying to know.
of a COP also. We've done a COP. Didn't we do it on this building?
Yep.
Yeah.
And the ambulance barn is another one, so that was also
So
done
what
with
did we,
CIPs.
what assets did we pledge? The building
The
itself?
building itself that was being built, yep.
Thank
So
you.
this
Okay.
building
That's-
is
that answers
pledged
my-
for those COPs, and the ambulance barn is pledged for that COP
And
issuance.
that doesn't work for every COP issuance, but it did in those circumstances.
We did look at this with our municipal advisor for like the landfill. Could we pledge the landfill as the pledge for the COPs for that?
And
they said absolutely not.
default,
There's
they
too
take
many.
possession.
There's too many other obligations of like the federal government and stuff like that, and it's the same way with the airport as well. So because there's
Highly
those,
regulated.
because of the grant assurances and things like that, we are not allowed to pledge that as.
See, that's crazy. The landfill's like a gold mine, you know? We just haven't tapped it yet.
And the airport as well.
It's because we have obligations for the post-closure.
For the landfill, yeah.
That are
The
not
landfill.
cheap.
Okay.
Any
Okay,
other-
I'll wait to know the other ones.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions on specific types of debt? Okay. So the legal framework, just to let you know, like what it is that we are obligated under is we're under TABOR for all of our funds except for our enterprise funds. So that means that we have to go to the voters for all indebtedness. And then we are also under our Home Rule Charter, Article 10, and that we can't pledge revenue or assign for purposes of borrowing. And that applies to all county funds. So this last November, when we asked the question about the landfill, that was actually not a TABOR question technically. That was due to our Home Rule Charter. And the airport will be the same way. So just to give you like a really high level of what a debt issuance process looks like. So we do some initial planning and needs assessment with our municipal advisor. We ask them questions. We kind of let them know what we're looking at, and they kind of give us an idea of what we might be looking at for, the rates, because we ask in the question the total amount of indebtedness that we can do, which includes the interest rate as well. So that's something that we look at, and we also take it to legal review to see, does the question that we're going to be asking comply with TABOR, Home Rule Charter, any other laws that may be applicable. Then we go to voter approval, again, if required, and it's required for pretty much everything except for those COPs. Once we have the voter approval, we engage our municipal advisor to help us through the bond rating and the actual, like, when are we going to issue the debt, how are we going to issue the debt, what kind of placement we want to do. So there's different types of placements. You can do a public issuance or commercial issuance, or you can do a private placement. So there's a lot of different instances, and the municipal advisor is the one who helps us make those decisions because they're tapped into everything, and they're the ones who have all this very specific knowledge. Then we go through the actual issuance. So we work with an underwriter, and we do the either public offering or private placement. And then after we've issued the bonds, we have that post-issuance compliance, which is why we have that separate policy for that. And that's things that we have to adhere to, either laws or covenants of the bond documents.
Just to add, before we can do any of this, we have to have your approval through a resolution. We can't, Liz and I can't just go off and decide to, borrow a bunch of money. So
Yes, thank you.
just wanted to let you know.
I should have, put that in.
So expect to see resolutions coming before you as part of our process of issuing the landfill debt at some point during this year, probably July or August.
And so part of this process that I've mentioned a couple times is the credit ratings. And so a credit rating is, there's several different credit rating agencies. There's Standard & Poor's, Fitch, Moody's, thank you. I know there's the three big ones. And they are looking at the bonds and they rank them. And what those rankings do is they allow the investors to know which bonds are riskier or less risky than other bonds. And so the things that they look at are things like, how's the county doing? What's the base? What's the revenue base? Is it, is it something that's very stable, or is it something that's more volatile? Is there something going on? So like I hate to use this, but like, Flint, Michigan with the water issues years ago, like something like that happening in a municipality really affects your credit rating. And so the higher your credit rating, the lower the borrowing cost is. And so credit rating is very important to us. And that's, again, this policy will, kind of help us prove as we're going through this rating process that we have, again, those sound financial policies and processes.
Yes, Greg.
Just wondering what sort of rating you're anticipating.
It depends. So if it was our property tax or even probably sales tax, we may get a AA or AA plus rating. For revenue bonds, it depends. Sometimes they go unrated just because of the nature of it being an enterprise, and so they just don't rate them. So we'll just have to see what our municipal advisor advises.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, and the follow-up question
Yeah.
is, do municipalities or counties have outlooks the same way companies do? Meaning, or countries even, like, we're all familiar with the U.S. being on credit watch for possible downgrade. Is the county in good standing today?
Yes.
And we've consistently been AA or AA plus?
Yes. Moody's basically does a review every year and issues either a stable or, in our case, improved rating, the last one, and I'd be happy to email that to you as soon as I get back to the office. But they'll go over, discuss our economy and the strength of the organization, and then make an assessment. So we did get an increased rating on our outstanding bonds, which are property tax or sales tax backed, just this last few months. And it went from a AA to a AA plus, basically because they reviewed our property tax and sales tax information.
Well done. It's a reflection of your work.
Patty.
Did we hear, or do we know, if there were any issues about the airport, because of some of the infrastructure uncertainties, existing infrastructure uncertainties, as far as a enterprise funding mechanism?
So that did not come up in this most recent,
I think you know where I'm going, or what I'm saying.
So the AA or our current rating is related to the outstanding debt that we currently have. They would do a new rating for new debt.
It's likely that the airport would be an unrated bond, and then it would be marketed to investors. Those
Kind
are
of in its own world.
Yeah, those are most likely be institutional investors who'll be pretty sophisticated in looking at those risks.
and that's why we'll likely have a higher interest rate on those bonds than we would like a GO bond or a sales tax revenue bond as well.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I just don't get why they wouldn't rate it, I suppose. I mean, especially as a public enterprise, right? Like our books are available to.
So it's a very long process to go through a rating, and sometimes what you get for what you it's not there's like a payoff here, and so and sometimes the rating agencies won't even rate on these types of things,
Right.
and so there's multiple
Because they don't want to say anything about the risk. They're like, let
Exactly.
the people taking on the bond risk, they can evaluate what they want
Correct.
to accept or not accept themselves.
Yeah, and so that will be something we'll work through with our municipal advisor, and they will. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's sorry. The other issue is the narrowness of the revenue source, and so It's easier in a way to look at a property tax base and an overall economy and how different sectors might contribute and go up and down and develop a rating there than to make that same assessment based on one revenue source that's really dependent, for example, on airport revenues or landfill revenues, which may be very elastic, right, depending on specific economic impacts that, you know, if you have that aren't even related to our community, like, you know, when September 11th happened, you know, our local airport revenues really tanked for a while there because of the impacts on the national airspace and nothing to do with local. That's less likely to happen in a property tax base. That's the other reason they don't do that.
Okay, thank you.
And I think when we had discussions with John Cohen, who's the transportation director for Piper Sandler, our municipal advisors, and he said that really with these big airport issuances, they know kind of like there's 2 or 3 kind of investors that will buy it, and so they just basically kind of put it out to them. There's no need to get a rating to put it on the, you know, the market. So it's just a different process.
Okay. Learning so much. Thank you.
So here's to Patty's question. All of our outstanding debt issuances as of 12/31/2024. So the ones that are highlighted in blue, those are our general obligation bonds that we have outstanding. And I will note that the sales tax revenue refunding bonds for RAFTA, those are paid for out of the RAFTA sales tax. So we collect the sales tax and pass it on to RAFTA.
We're just like the agent?
We're just kind of the agent for it, yeah.
We issued that debt when RAFTA was actually part of the county. And so for some reason we decided to keep the debt and let
that was nice of us.
There wasn't, but they do pay it. We take it out of their sales tax that we pass them every month.
And I also put the maturity dates on there so you could see when those will fully mature and when they will be off of our books, assuming no refundings in the future.
Do we ever prepay?
We've refunded. As far as, like, while I've been here, we've refunded, which is, you know, if we can find a lower interest rate or that kind of thing. But we have never, as far as, again, since I have been here, we have never prepaid anything. But again, we've only been here for 8 years, so never say never, but there has not been a reason for that.
I remember when we did we reissued it with a new lower interest rate, and we saved money, and I remember that coming back as a supplemental or something in our budget process.
Yeah.
Very savvy.
Well,
it made a big difference.
With the interest rates that we had for that, the last 5, before they went up exponentially, it was really worth, because those were the lowest interest rates in history. And so there were several bond issuances. I believe the 2020s refunded a 2010 bond issuance. And so the 2010 actually refunded a previous one. So anyways, again, we do the refundings when there's a significant savings that can be had because of, interest rate changes. And right now, that is not the space that we are in. It could be in the future. We don't know where it's going to go. So it's something we kind of pay attention to and we talk to our municipal advisor about as well. And so for the debt capacity, this is for general obligation bonds only. And so this is kind of the calculation that we go through. You can see that, and this is estimated because we don't have final numbers yet, but our estimated 2024 debt capacity will be $155 million for general obligation bonds.
I'm sorry, so that 15% number is just what we've taken out against what we could. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, and my computer, oh, there it goes. I was just going to say my computer wasn't working. Okay. So right now we have actually 2 unissued debt that have been approved by the voters. So in 2008, when we asked for the Healthy Rivers and Streams sales tax, we also asked for debt capacity at that time. That is $12 million with a maximum repayment cost of $21 million. And then the most recent was the Solid Waste Center revenue bonds, which is 22 million of basically principal with up to 37 million, including interest payments.
Is there something envisioned for that Healthy Rivers bond? I guess I'm looking at Greg being on that board and Patty.
That's a long time ago, and I'm trying to remember. That was just that was the beginning of the entire program.
Yeah.
I don't know the history of that. I suspect the bond authorization was in the event that there's an opportunity for a major water rights acquisition that we could bond against, and that hasn't been
I think it was
something.
just part of the thought process. If we're gonna do it, let's put it in there so we have it available and things are being tossed around, but yeah.
Yeah, looking at the
I don't remember
original,
big specific at that time.
and when I looked at the original authorization for that, it basically spoke to if in case there is an opportunity that could
Yeah.
really benefit the Healthy Rivers and Streams
Kind of built it in.
Yeah.
Planning ahead.
Granted, 12 million doesn't get you nearly as much nowadays as it used to.
Kelly's thinking over there, look at that thought process. I can feel it from here.
Buy out the.
Could buy a deal. How
Right.
about that?
All right, so all of this leads up to the two policies that I wanted to discuss with you. The first is the debt issuance policy, and the second is the debt post-issuance compliance policy. So both of those were attached to your meeting. I do have a couple of minor tweaks that I will update when I bring it back for first reading. And any other things that you all would like to add into the policy. One of them was that I found that I referenced a CRS that is actually no longer there, and it's actually a state constitution item, so I have updated that in my version, and like I said, I will bring that back to you. Is there any questions or anything specific in the policies that any of you wanted to discuss?
I just would like to confirm, is this the first adoption of such policies?
It is.
Yeah.
Officially, yes.
In anticipation of
Have we
going into debt.
Did we ever get called out? I don't remember reading that in any of our audit.
Well, we've always had them in the finance department, but we felt that with us going out for a lot of debt issuances, it would be important, and as Liz has already said, looked upon favorably if the governing body also approves that.
So where will it actually go to rest? It's in your office now. You'll move it across the hall into John's office, or?
So my understanding, I talked to Jeanette about this, is that it will still be a finance policy. It will just be backed by your authority saying that we have looked at this and we have approved it.
That we can demonstrate a resolution from the board is helpful as
Just for more
investors are
surety.
looking at the, consistency and expectation around our policies.
And this also involves you, because you are going to be the ones who are actually issuing the debt. And so we also thought that it was good for you to have eyes on this, more than us just saying, like, this is our policy.
And you're going into debt.
So it was also because, again, this policy really affects the BoCC, and so we wanted to make sure that we had your approval of it before we said this is what you have to stand to.
I have a
Yes,
broader
Patty, go
question. Can I go to these two broader questions?
Go for it.
FAB input and bond council, I think you've already run this through bond council. What about the financial advisory board?
Yeah, we could run it by them, for sure.
I would like to see what their input is.
Yep.
To see, so we're all on the same pages.
Yep, absolutely.
Great, thanks. But bond council, you had mentioned you'd already,
Well, we've just, we haven't actually run this by bond council yet.
do we need to, or should we, or do we just want to surprise them when we go into debt, or, I don't know.
Well, I wanted to have kind of your first input before we
Okay.
said that, like, this is what we're going to adhere to.
I always hear about
so-
when we're talking to bond council, I'm like,
And we have a few weeks before the first reading,
Perfect.
so I will we'll
Yeah.
run that. We'll also run it by the county attorney's office as well.
I think it makes great sense at this time of our lives to put this literally on the books clearly, because we have some big decisions coming up. Thankfully. So
Thumbs
thanks,
up.
great job.
Good.
Liz, you made it very understandable.
Yeah,
It's amazing. Thank you.
And, gosh, and we understood it in 30 minutes. I can't believe that. That's great. I thought something this wonky was going to take a lot longer.
Awesome. Well, if you do have any further questions, feel free to reach out, and we will be back for after reviewing this with the FAB and Bond Counsel and the Attorney's Office. We'll be back the first reading in February for this, and
Sounds
second
good.
reading in February.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, board, we are scheduled for a break. Do folks want to take a break or keep chugging?
I'd take a break. I
Take a
feel
break?
like I need one.
10 minutes, 15?
Sure.
10.
10? 10 minutes, good, sufficient? All right, we'll be back at 3:10, please. Thank you.
Kelly, I found an article from
Goody.
this
Okay, welcome back, everyone, to the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners work session on Tuesday, January 21st, the coldest day of the year. And we are running about 30 minutes ahead of schedule. And now we're going to discuss our preparations for our joint meeting with the City of Aspen, which will happen 2 Mondays from now on February 3rd. And I met with Mayor Tory. I know he emailed all of you with some input from that conversation. I don't think we've fully honed in on a proposed agenda yet. I will say that in general, are we back? Okay. In general, our discussion set a couple of goals. One being identifying topics that we have a shared decision-making nexus on and trying to focus some time on that. And then also perhaps creating some time for us to exchange updates on topics where sort of the city is the lead driver in the driver's seat and it may have some impact on the county and vice versa. Is sort of the general approach that we've proposed, I guess. I will look, John, you look like you have maybe some input to offer. I don't know if more came through from the city manager's office, but I can talk more about how my conversation with Tori went too.
Yeah, no, the only, and I have not had a recent conversation with Sarah about it, but I will reach out post this conversation. What I know we had talked about at the staff level along these lines, Kelly, and what we were going to propose is bringing Summer in to do a presentation on our homeless study in particular. I know that's been an area that this board has wanted to re-engage. We felt it was better around the strategic planning efforts that we're going through now and starting to have some early conversations and input from the elected bodies around that conversation so that there's some buy-in, maybe participation moving forward with that. So we have had Summer pencil in that date pending, I think, these conversations. And that was the only item that we had previously talked about at the staff level.
And I did bring that up with Tori. I think I didn't have full information, and so the question that was outstanding for he and I was whether would this be a repeat presentation for the county and then sort of initial information for the city, or is this a conversation where we're like sort of both hearing information fresh and engaging in a dialogue jointly?
It'll be more of a repeat. The city has not had a conversation at all, so there would be definitely some repeat. I need to check in with Summer whether she's ready to bring any additional information forward.
Okay. Okay, that is helpful, and I think that they're open to that. We didn't confirm that because I couldn't totally answer Tori's question on that. Some of the other things that he had brought up as being of interest to the city is Highway 82 safety. Again, this would be kind of an update from us to them relative to actions that we're taking and have requested of CDOT, for example, like at the Smith Hill intersection and something else that I'm forgetting. Lazy Glen, I think. Well, I don't know if they were that concerned that far down. There was some interest from Francie that I brought forward to Tori about us hearing their survey results from the entrance to Aspen question. I did indicate to Tori that, we've already had entrance to Aspen presentations from their staff pretty recently. And we would be having our own separate conversation relative to the ballot measures. And so that would be sort of outside the scope of what we would want to cover at a joint meeting, but perhaps hearing what their survey results were. They're interested in kind of an airport construction timeline and what we're thinking about right now in terms of planning on all that.
Was there a
as
specific
well
with
as
the multimodal with the RAISE grant?
they'd like to know about the RAISE grant, but then also, what do we know about our construction horizon right now, and what does planning for the next decade look like on that? Again, all of those topics don't really have a shared decision-making nexus. They're kind of things
More
that,
informational.
you know, exchange between the two. So one of the things that he talked about is thinking about perhaps having a discussion or update relative to safety along up to the Maroon Bells. You know, his concern was we're sending all these bikers out to the county Netherlands, and we're in this partnership discussion about how we move people up to the Bells and safety at the Bells. You know, if that would be of interest to us. I don't know if we have any updated information along those lines to share.
Cycling safeties, it would be it's interesting. Did he bring that one up?
He did.
To you? With the Bells in particular, you know, that's a busy route, but we do have non-motorized vehicular accident statistics that are quite high, much higher than any other county. For injuries, ER visits is how it's categorized. And I've brought it up at Public Health a couple of times. It's kind of interesting, but the statistics, if you go online and look at the CDPHE, you know, we are off the charts compared to everyone else. And some people think it's music students falling off WeCycles. Other people might think it's people commuting to the Woody Creek Tavern. And, you know, it's probably all of the above, or commuting back, coming home. So it's probably a worthy discussion, because the city has most of the bike shops that rent the bikes, and certainly we're invested with WeCycle and RAFTA, and you know, maybe there's a conversation to be had there. But our incidence of ER visits, if the information's right on their website, is really kind of surprising. It's like 3 to 10 times higher than other mountain biking counties. Mm-hmm. Not just, you know, it's like compared to Fruita or, you know, Mesa County or whatever, it's still quite high.
Yeah.
So that might be an interesting public safety conversation, but it's not just about the bells.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I might suggest that we sort of pitch that for a future meeting in the spring when it's more like it's sort of timely for the
It might take
activity.
that long to make a policy change anyway.
There already are policies out there, I know, at the bike shop. They're supposed to be, where you have to watch a video before you get on your electric bike at these bike shops. And that's a question I have. Is that actually happening? A lot of that was an educational process. I don't know how involved the chamber was and the city, since we don't really rent a lot that are that are in our purview. They're outside of our purview. So that would be a question I would have, and that information would be interesting. And there are short videos. It'd be something worth watching to see if there's any other ways we could improve upon it or get it out there more. But yeah, it's part of the education.
The bike shops and the bike accesses and the tourists are in the town, but they're riding in the county.
Right, but
And so it's a worthwhile-
the shops where you can
Right.
require them before they rent a bike
Right.
are in the city.
It's possible they already are doing that and people are still falling off.
That's what I'm wondering, are they
Yeah.
actually showing the videos and making people, or people just walking by checking the box? I don't know, it's a good question. But
I might
Well-
suggest for this meeting, we heard a lot during the homelessness planning conversation that I know I could probably benefit, even if some of it is a repeat, and trying to continue to cultivate the city's interest in partnering with us on that. So having it be repetitive for us, I think is not.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's a worthwhile.
We'll try and bring some new stuff.
And it could be
Yeah,
concise.
and again, there was a lot there, so I feel like, and I don't know if you were able to listen to that, so it would be a good benefit for Jeffrey too.
I did want to circle back, since he brought up the bicycle thing. If we do it in March, will that be too late? Once we come to some sort of conclusion, the summer may be over. What if we did have it at this meeting, at least to tee it up? And then, you know, work on it from there. Because as we know, if we have a meeting in February, June will be here fairly quickly, and
I have a suggestion. Why don't we introduce it at the meeting on the 3rd?
yeah,
And
exactly.
say, so give us the information that you have, we'll try to comply information from our side. So when we bring it forward, we have the information we need, suggestions and thoughts, because I don't know if we'll have the opportunity to have all of that by the 3rd.
Exactly. That's my
But I think the
concern.
homeless one, because we need to get into their budget, I am really adamant about that discussion happening, because
we need to address that issue of sheltering our homeless, especially when it's 12 degrees below zero outside.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then I guess I would maybe suggest that if we hear from them on their survey results from the entrance to Aspen, and then perhaps we offer, we bring information about airport construction timeline, then that would probably fill out.
And the raise
time with
grant.
them. Yep, and the raise grant. Is what I would suggest. I didn't, if that's okay with all of you, I'll follow up with Tori to say this is how we would like to proceed.
And the information that he sent us, I thought it was interesting and nice of Tori to send each of us an individual text message that I did forward on to John Peacock because he wasn't copied in on it. And I printed out the information
Survey results.
on their survey results. I have just skipped through them, but yeah, I think we need to have a little breakdown on what they think was learned from their survey.
Is that going to be worthwhile time for you?
Housing and transportation, or unhoused and transportation, seems good too. So
Great.
everything's in one of those two buckets, if you would.
So are you saying we house people on buses?
Some people are housing in transportation.
Yeah.
And then Kelly, you
Yeah.
also wanted some open time at the end, just for kind of an open discussion
Yeah.
exchange with council.
I think so, or just planning on, we can bring up this proposal for bike and pedestrian safety and discuss that.
Was anything left over from the EOTC that got punted into 2025?
Everything?
It was-
I recall it was
Sorry, I was
everything.
Oh, I don't know, I missed that fun end of that discussion.
There was a sabotage of the meeting, basically,
Budget,
because of a
yeah.
line item in the budget.
But is there anything,
That was a tough meeting.
given your point about shared decision-making, is there anything that would be applicable at this February meeting rather than wait for the next EOTC, realizing it's only 2 of the 3 parties there?
Well, we need the,
Nancy would love to have input on that. Yeah.
I will say that staff went back, Linda and myself went back and addressed the outstanding budget issues, and that was all approved by City Council. I do think we have a broader governance discussion that we need to have. I don't know that we'd be ready for that on the 3rd.
Yeah,
yeah.
it depends. I mean, I'm of the opinion that EOTC has a lot of work to do relative to sort of discussion on the entrance to Aspen and, and then there's opportunity for things on, do we want to coalesce around free fares, and figure out a plan for that, which would require decision-making from all
Well,
three
the
bodies, but.
fares up here are essentially free all the way to
Yeah, but if
Intercept lot.
we extend it more, we gotta think about more buses and more drivers and more
more
housing,
housing
and
for the
it's not
drivers, yeah.
just,
That's
that's
the
a-
issue.
it's another one of those.
But I
situations
have
where
asked,
Do the right thing.
I have asked the RAFTA staff to let us know what is the cost of that gap, and I haven't heard yet, but I can follow up on that. It'd be nice to know what if it was $1 million, to
Yeah.
make it happen for a year, or 500,000 for a year. It would be nice to know that, and perhaps there's some ways to find that funding. And I've talked to them also about, I'm on the last mile committee, and we were talking about funding that, because the funding for that's running out. And, we were ramping it down over the next few years. While we need more of it, the funding's ramping down. So how are we gonna fund that? But maybe there's some other funding models that would be similar to what we might do for the gap for free fares. I think it's a worthwhile discussion, but that's kind of a discussion to have with RAFTA.
But he did ask about EOTC, so that's why I was
Oh,
thinking
sure.
it'd be a way to bring
Well,
in.
can I
Yeah,
circle back on that? With EOTC, we all get hung up on the entrance to Aspen, thinking that it's one specific thing. Is it going to be this thing, or is it going to be 3 blocks that? When honestly, it's really about transportation to mobility in Aspen, from, I'm going to say, as far as Brush Creek, if not farther. And if we don't start thinking of it that way, we're never going to solve a problem. It doesn't matter which way the vote goes, because we're not going to solve the fundamental problem. That's my own take on that. So it'd be great to have a comprehensive discussion about mobility to Aspen rather than just the entrance, because I think of the entrance as back, as soon as you see the mountains,
Sure.
So.
Right, the entrance is like the one infrastructure component to a broader.
Right,
a
the
bigger
absolute
topic.
entrance at the edge of town is so different from,
Yeah.
the gateway at the Brush Creek turnoff, for instance, or something like that. That would be a worthwhile conversation, and that's where we start mentioning Edward Ullemans again, and Michael Miracle, and Skiko and their ambitions. I would love a conversation like that, and I think Tori and I tried to make that happen last time, and we got dissuaded. So let's try again.
With Michael and
Edward.
Yeah, I've been trying to get that, because I've never seen it, and it's been put off because we were gonna do it with the broader audience, and we'll get there.
So maybe we should bring it up at this meeting and then plan on it for EOTC and try not to let it get kicked out from under us next time.
It may be good for them to get past their vote in March to really have a
Maybe they wanted,
conversation about it.
I wanna kinda stay out of that fray for now.
Yeah, me too.
Agreed. Okay,
I've been
does that
trying
work?
to. Yeah. Futility.
Okay. And it's a 2-hour meeting, right?
Yes.
Oh, we've already filled it up. You've done your job, Kelly.
Well, it's hopefully meaningful, Phil.
Well, that's just for the airport topic.
Yeah. Okay.
I have an appointment, I gotta go to it.
All right, well, I think that takes care of joint meeting. We will have, hopefully I can circle back with Tori tonight. If there's any huge objections, I'll bring them up in open discussion tomorrow.
And I'm gonna go, if you're okay, I'll go ahead and shoot that out to
Yeah,
Sarah too,
that's
as far
great.
as what we talked about.
She's in Louisville,
Can we talk about?
public interviews.
Louisville, right?
I call it Louisville, I'm a baseball player. Louisville.
So she's not in Kentucky. Okay, future agendas. Let me pull mine up, please.
All right, just a couple of things for you. We did post the mountain rescue tour, not mountain rescue tour, I'm sorry, the
It's at Mountain Rescue.
Yeah, it's at Mountain Rescue. It's the incident management team tour for X Games.
Command post.
Yeah. We weren't planning on getting a vehicle or anything like that, letting folks find their way out there. Bus may be a good idea.
Who's planning to go?
When is it?
It's Friday at 1:30.
I may go.
It's really interesting. I'm going, and then I'm going on to another X Games event right after that.
And Jeffrey, I think it's really good that you're going.
you'd love
'cause, that you'll see how we manage all incidents, whether it's COVID or
You
X
need to bring your
Games.
ID, because they won't let you in.
Okay.
And you need to stand where they tell you to stand, because there's a lot of guys in there with guns.
Itchy trigger fingers.
It's really fun to go see.
Okay.
I have a future agenda question, and I don't know if Mr. Peacock knows the answer, but Charlotte will probably. How many open seats do we have on P and Z? Just Jeffrey's vacant seat? We got a lot of people applying.
There's
I don't know.
There's,
off
current,
the
there's
top of my
currently
head,
6 on
yeah.
the board, and I tendered my resignation for 12:31 at 59 minutes past the hour.
But you don't know if there's anybody else whose seat's up, or?
So there's 2 seats up in 2025 that would be, April of 2025. So.
So we must just be interviewing for your seat.
We might be getting renewals and
Yeah.
that sort of
I
I'll
thing.
check with Charlotte, because there's I don't know if you guys have
A
seen
lot
on
of
future
people.
agendas, there's a lot of people applying.
They kept it open,
didn't
think, and
notice.
they kept it open past. Originally, it was supposed to close in January or December, and they extended it.
Because we did not have a lot of applications
Yeah,
at that
we got a
time,
lot.
which surprised us, given the amount of
And we have a
I
lot of
think
space
interest we'd
being
heard out
reserved for
there, so we
future
reopened it.
applicants.
Yeah.
I'll check with Charlotte.
I will, let's start at the top. So, January 28th, we were gonna possibly reserve some time if we don't get Three Meadows done tomorrow, so we'll just, I think we're operating under the assumption that Three
Might do a
Meadows will be
special
done
meeting.
tomorrow, but, where I had to confirm some last minute contract details. And then Patty, you are in Accra Thursday morning, right? Or Tuesday morning, the 28th?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is why we didn't schedule an exec then, okay.
But, you know, I told Rye, I've got dates, I need to get them printed out for you and Rye and for Sam, that if there's something, I can be here by 10:30 or 11 if Rye needed an hour or something in the morning. It's just I can't be here ready to go in at 11:45 and.
And Kelly, just so the board's
Yes,
aware, we've
excuse me.
actually been invited to the Accra meeting to talk a little bit about housing. So Summer's going to be there.
This coming one?
Ashley, this coming.
I haven't seen the agenda. so-
Yeah, so just so you're not surprised
Thank
to.
you. If everybody shows up and I know the room.
I know.
Yeah, maybe I'll join.
Ashley,
I
myself,
don't know
and
where it is.
Summer.
Do we know where it is?
It's a great question. I usually look the day before.
Sometimes, sometimes you don't know until the day before. Because Meadows is, Justin from the Meadows is now at the White Elephant.
What's the way elevator?
It's across from, I knew you'd say that, across from the Molly.
Okay.
Hotel Aspen, wasn't that what that was?
Oh, okay.
White Elephant. I thought you wrapped it up and gave it away at Christmas, but.
Confused. Okay, well, maybe I'll join you guys next Tuesday morning.
I'll keep you in the loop.
Thank you. Let me check my notes.
So Francie will be at her water meeting again tomorrow?
I believe so. She wanted to maybe phone in and vote on a few things. Tuesday, February 4th, exec for the morning. Some other things we've already reviewed. Afternoon, Tuesday, February 11th. I don't know, I'm not seeing anything else that is jumping out to me.
The February 12th regular meeting has got some significant land use on here.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe significant is not
Well,
necessarily the
Darling
right word.
is getting continued to March. Bayole, yes, and Little Ditch, yes. I don't know if Little Ditch will take long, because it doesn't seem like a ton of decisions to make, but we've had input from the Political Caucus on
It's
that.
gonna, a little bit of discussion.
Any of those you need to recuse from, sir?
I was gonna wait till future, or open discussion.
To talk about recusing
Recusal.
from some of the future agenda items?
Yeah.
You can do it.
I think now is a good
Is
time.
okay? So tomorrow, Wednesday, January 22nd, I will recuse from the number 5, the Land Use Code Amendment Lighting Code. I voted on that in September. On Bell-Jack Blue, I will recuse because I think to benefit the county, the applicant, and staff, to bring a new person up to speed, which is really 2024 business that rolled into 2025. I would request a recusal on that. On Emma Fields, I will vote, because Emma Fields is an annual review. Even though I voted, I think originally in 2021, that was for the original application, not for the
Right, we've
annual
had 2
review.
votes on their application.
Right. So 2 recusals and a vote, so 5, 6, and 7.
Okay, you get to go get pizza for everybody.
I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to.
It's gonna be
I
a
will
long
be-
day.
As long as it can't be gluten-free or vegan.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
We will be at Georgia Fed.
Yeah.
And bring,
So as long, we'll text you to bring back
Yeah.
dinner for the rest of
Yeah.
it. Okay, thank you for that. How about any on the 12th of February? The Bayou Darling Farm is gonna be continued to March. The Bayou Special Review, this is a first reading, right? We haven't heard that yet, so you
Darling
shouldn't
may be
have
a,
to.
Darling may be a recusal if that's been going on for a year, because I think Darling, we met with the caretaker probably a year ago. Bayou, I've not been involved. That never came to P&Z because that was a temporary tent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
did not
Little
come.
Ditch should.
No, neither
Okay.
of those.
Okey doke, good to
But thank you
know.
for asking.
Yep. Tuesday, February 18th, that's our first day of our retreat, hey? And the 19th.
So Darling Farm.
I will just, if I'm real lucky with traffic, I can get to places by 8:30, but, no earlier,
We won't
please.
really start out until after that.
Okay,
So probably 9-ish.
okay. And then 5.
But breakfast may start getting served at 8:30.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
great, that's fine. Okay.
Darling Farms, we're gonna hear on the 12th, but then on the 12th of March, it says continued from the 12th.
Yeah, on the 12th of February, it's noted as a continuance to the 12th of March on my packet.
Okay. Oh, so we won't be hearing it on the, I'm getting all these 3/12s, 4/12s, 5/12s. So we won't be hearing it on Wednesday, the
February.
12th of February.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm like, what are we doing here? We're already planning to continue. We are.
I will note, we did request, do we still want to have time to take a position on the Aspen ballot measures?
I don't.
You're the one that requested it.
No, I wanted to have a discussion, but the city is now not gonna be doing a major discussion on the entrance. So we won't really have the information until after.
There's still going to be a vote on the ballot.
Yeah, so. I don't know, we'll have to hear what they say on the 3rd. 6th, when are we meeting with them? 3rd.
The 3rd.
Yeah.
Monday, the 3rd.
I may be more confused or may be very clear after that meeting. No guarantees either way.
Any other opinions on that, Greg? Jeffrey?
I don't want to be lobbied, and I'm not sure I need to weigh in on it, other than, I'm not sure I'm going to add a lot of useful information to that discussion. But I'd certainly listen to what people want to say. Does that help?
And I would rather not enter the fray and let voters vote.
Okay.
Question, do we have a meeting on the 28th?
Yes?
Okay, how come I'm not seeing it here? Gosh,
Oh, wait.
So, and
it's not the fourth Wednesday, is it?
Because remember,
Tuesday.
the first part of January is all screwed up because
Right.
of the way the dates
It's
fall.
it's the fourth, it is the fourth Tuesday.
Kelly,
Tuesday, January
I believe
28th,
I'm
we have a
recusal
big
on
meeting.
Darling, but I am a voter on seasonal housing.
Oh, you're right, we don't have an agenda.
There's another
posted
P&Z person.
for-
God, we have like 6 people
That's a
applying?
good question, Greg.
Big seat to fill.
The 28th?
6 people applying for one seat.
Yeah, I don't,
You have a hot seat?
well, February 28th we wouldn't meet, but we do have an agenda for the 25th and the 26th.
But of January, we have one on the 28th.
Yes.
Yeah, which month were you talking about, Greg?
January.
Oh.
Yes. We don't meet until 1.
Okay, I may have to
Unless
go to
Rye
Denver.
has something he needs to sneak in there.
That's just a work session, so I may be doing that remotely on my way to Denver.
Well, that may, we'll see what happens tomorrow on the 3 Meadows.
Right.
I do have a question, though.
Yes, Patty.
On the 28th, under legislative changes property tax, will we have time, do you think, to talk about the special tax benefit for an issue of significant local concern?
I asked that very same question, as well as our property tax relief program.
Right.
And what I understand from John, who can correct me, is that this is looking at laws that have already been in effect relative to property tax assessment processes and calculations.
So
And
different.
how it's a mess, and sort of educating us on that. And then in the future, which we don't schedule.
We haven't put it on
scheduled
yet,
yet.
Okay.
Will be that
The question that you and I have
discussion,
been
the property
talking about.
tax relief.
Okay, that gives me a little time to
Program
rethink.
discussion.
Okay, perfect.
That's right.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. I think that's it for future agendas. Board open discussion.
I have one quick. I don't know if anybody has received a call from Gail Schwartz. She wants to talk to us. Are we gonna, how do we,
Yeah, so.
About the modular factory.
Yeah, so that's
funding?
something that Kelly had brought forward. Ashley talked to Gail because we're putting together kind of a portfolio of just kind of asks that we know of now ahead of some of our partnership discussions, and we wanted to be able to present those all at the same time. And I think Gail
I
understood
told Gail that I thought we would be trying to prioritize use of our new property tax fund, maybe at our retreat. Is that gonna be part of the retreat discussion?
Is she coming for a grant to build the factory, or is she trying to take orders for homes?
She wants funding, I believe, yeah.
I would be
Priority is-
interested in talking about placing a pre-order for homes, which could help her find her funding.
I would be cautious about taking that approach just because, for example, at Phillips, if we were building on the field where you could build the same unit in a repeated fashion, then that may make more sense. But because we're building on the hillside, each
custom.
unit is going to be unique, and it may not be as given to doing the modular. We just don't know yet. And so I would I would caution you that you may want to consider it more in the light of a grant request and prioritization than a pre-order of units we don't know that can be produced yet. So.
I was thinking we might have other locations too. I wasn't even being location specific, but.
Yeah, and my only caution is I would rather, as your manager, you tell me what to do, but I would rather, as your manager, know where we're putting them and
Before we order them. Well, I
we
would
do a
too, and I'd
pre-order.
rather know that it's gonna happen before I
Yeah.
gave them money also.
Well, and there's, I don't know how they know. I rarely go to Whole Foods, but I seem to see Alan every time I go. I'm like, are you here again?
He's got a
He
tracker on
walks over from the house. He thinks we can fit in a modular factory any design we want. I said, well, we haven't vetted all that information yet. Sustainability, fire codes, location, topographic, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a bigger discussion, but
I agree,
I told
yeah.
Gail pretty much what I think we've all said. We aren't at that point yet of tossing out checks. We need to prioritize what issues we have at hand. Because it's not a huge sum of money.
It sounds like an investment in a startup, and I've done that and lost my shirt before, so I'm very skeptical.
I mean, I would be happy to share, they've put through a very thoughtful pro forma and they have money on the ground that they're spending to make this
Oh, yeah.
happen.
Like Gail does. She does an amazing job.
Yeah, and the request for, I think it's worth a look. It's not like
Definitely worth
it's
it,
not
yeah.
like a, back of the napkin.
Right.
They're at a point where they have dotted a lot of I's to get to where they're at. And so I think I wouldn't have suggested that we spend time talking about if it was like real early.
No, I think we need to put it on our list of prospective partners and kind of fine tune that list. And I think we have the opportunity coming up in 2 weeks, so.
And there's
Or 3
potentially, I think, interesting financing opportunities to engage with money on that.
Yeah.
Too. It's not just one path or no path.
I'm reminded, I can't help it, but I was just thinking about the biomass plant, which sounded like such a great idea and was a going concern, and then poof, it's gone, what, a decade later? It lasted a decade, maybe.
All of them are gone in Colorado,
So it's like,
most of them.
it's a hard thing, and they're trying to create a subsidized thing that competes with the free market, and that's problematic for their free market competitor in Rifle, if he's still in business. Yeah,
I'd
so
like to see the
I'll look at
list.
it, though.
Any other open discussion? Jeffrey?
So I've got a couple meetings coming up that everyone should just be aware of. Welcome to being the new commissioner. Everyone wants to meet with you. So I've shared a few with John already. I did get the call from Gail. I've
That was
received
that was me.
two calls from Matt, both I think on Saturdays or
Matt
Sundays.
Yamashita.
Matt Yamashita from CPW before and after. So again, sort of open discussion for the board. Is there an appropriate time for CPW to come back and sort of have a debrief and demystify and just sort of, I did watch their 2-hour presentation to both ACES and Open Space and Trails, and I thought Matt and Curtis did an amazing job.
They are amazing, both. of them.
So, and incredible response in the room to their presentation, so I enjoyed watching that. I'm meeting with Kevin Warner in the next week or two. I've met with Valerie and Maggie. They're about to release their ask for CC.
They're coming into us for 75 minutes.
In 2 weeks. I think they're on the agenda. I'm meeting with Josie Terrace tomorrow, unrelated to
Creating
the
a
board,
tax
but
district
related
for
to
childcare.
wildfire. So Allison knows and John knows, so it's not Pitkin related. And I've met with Michael a few times regarding jail. And then April Long, I've met with one-on-one as well regarding the Housing Coalition. So that's sort of the new commissioner induction.
Well done.
I have a call in for Dave Myler too, just to, he's been out of town.
I think he's traveling for like a year.
Have you seen Kevin Warner yet, or you have a plan to, or?
Plan to, in the next 2 weeks.
Let me know. I might
Yeah.
try to tag along.
Wonderful,
I haven't seen him in ages.
wonderful. We'll probably do.
You just
co-
emailed me
yeah.
too, so maybe you're on the list.
We'll probably.
Matt's been great, though. I have to put a
Yeah.
word out for CPW,
No, Matt's-
calling us
Yeah.
and just saying, you know, I just want to keep you guys in the loop, and calling us on Saturday or Sunday, it's fine with me, because that's when they were bringing the wolves in.
He calls
so.
me after the fact.
I think Francie'd be a great person to say, when do you think
Yeah.
the wolf thing is ready to come back to us again, and have CPW do a presentation? I can't wait to watch the callers,
And
the
that was
tracking.
Francie's input, because I forwarded Jeffrey's
Yeah.
request for time to get her input, and she thought,
Yeah.
you know, when they're ready
Yeah.
to
Right.
come to us.
Let's
then
keep
we'll
that
make
door
time for
definitely
it.
open for them.
I don't know if that is satisfactory to
No,
you.
no, it was a satisfactory. I think it's the right approach, which is let it, I don't know what the right word is, but
Right
let,
then.
let the issue lie for a minute. And I think it would be nice, similar to the OST and ACES presentation, it would be nice for them to sort of do the after action report for the community, that they're not worried about transparency. That they can be, you know, full disclosure, here's how it went, and provide an after action.
Yeah.
Which would be the lessons CPW learned even in this current release.
Do you know the biggest problem I have with the wolves right now is they're supposed to release between 30 and 50. They released 29. I hope they just don't bring in one more and let that one go alone.
No.
They kind of like hanging out with each other.
What
is
about
my
the lone
understanding.
wolf?
The lone wolf. Oh yeah, we got the lone wolf. But I think it'll be interesting to see what the callers show us, where they track.
And we can get copies of these if you haven't seen them, but both Eagle and Garfield counties have issued kind of protest letters at this point around the release, and so we're the only county that has
We just
not
have to figure out
done
how to live together.
Well, we're
Unfortunately,
reflecting our voter sentiment at the,
that. Absolutely,
But-
yeah.
you know.
But the wolves will go for where the elk and the deer and the cows are. So they'll be heading to lower terrain, bottomland probably, because that's where everybody is this time of year. So they're not going to stick around wherever you release them. They're on the
I
move.
just hope they're warm.
Well, warm enough. They're coming from Canada. They probably think this is
Yeah,
balmy. They're
that's
like,
true.
it's hot down here.
Take off that fur coat.
Other open discussion?
Yeah, I just had a clarification. We still have the CCI proxy designations. I know there was a brief discussion about that during board appointments. it has traditionally been either I've been the proxy for committees, with exception of Health and Human Services, which has been our Health and Human Services Director, Lindsay. But I thought there was also some conversation about changing that. And so we do have a form filled out, just like we've always done it, but I wanted to bring that back to the board to see if there's.
I didn't think we were gonna change Lindsay from doing that.
I thought we were gonna have Lindsay at Human Services and then Levi for the other committees.
Yeah.
Wasn't there discussion about him concerned that if he's
Yeah,
a
and
lobbyist as well, that didn't make sense to me. I
He
just
did a
assumed
good
did it.
job vetting that with all the other groups, and nobody has,
Yeah.
see CAT, CAST,
no
they're
problem.
all fine with, and if there's a point of concern, then he said he steps out.
So-
And that's kind of how that's how all those organizations have been dealing with it. So I'm comfortable, I just wanna make sure we won't be starting something new, but we're just following what others are doing.
Are you comfortable
yeah,
with us
that's the
taking
question.
away your authority?
I think, so I've been that for Mesa and Picking counties, and I've never taken a vote in 20 years, so I'm
Not worried
not wed
about
to it.
We better warn
I mean, I
Levi.
do feel like
Let's
what
let
has
Levi not do
traditionally
it.
happened was either Steve or Francie or I would tag team, like, hey, I can't cover this committee, can you cover it for me? You know, so it would probably be a rarer occasion for Levi to have.
And Jeffrey's now the expert CCI person.
Well, and Levi is certainly tracking, so that makes
Yeah.
sense. We can
He's done a great
adjust
job.
the form then, and then we'll have that. I couldn't remember where that landed.
Well,
so.
we wanted to ask him if that was okay.
You
so
could
I
put
think we
yourself on as
You
an
get to tell
alternate.
him. That's it.
Make yourself alternate proxy.
Alternate proxy. Why, that sounds like a real demotion, an
Yeah.
alternate proxy.
Okay. Other open discussion items?
Kelly, I'll probably discuss the retreat options then with you, location
Oh,
options, and we'll make a
yes.
call.
Okay,
Okay.
Did you
we have strong
narrow it down?
opinions?
On
Well, here's what I can tell you. Give me just a sec. My computer just stopped working. Give me just a second
What,
here.
what,
Retreat.
oh,
Just
I thought we already had
locations.
that planned, we just don't know where we're having it.
Yeah, so we're gonna, next week, I'm gonna come and talk through kind of the agenda. I've previewed it with a number of you already, and so, yeah, I think that will, it's the location we're struggling with a little bit. I will say that, without giving the exact pricing out, Toclot is our overall cheapest option, followed closely by the Hoffman.
Really?
And it's because there's a facility charge as well as food charge. So the food charge for Toclot, which I think is what you heard about, high because of the delivery and the.
We don't even know if they're delivering or if our staff has to run up and down there all
The
the time.
facility, yeah, well, I'll probably be packing breakfast up with Charlotte in the back of my car or something.
Sean
That
in
would make
charge
it
of-
less
But
expensive.
the facility charge is lower, and so that's why the overall is lower. Hoffman and the Molly are pretty close. The Molly doesn't appear to have windows in the room.
It's
that-
very,
We
it's a
know,
very
I know that
bland room.
basement
And
room.
I'm guessing that
You been in it?
probably.
I don't want to spend a day there.
The Hoffman does have windows kind of overlooking, towards the Highway 82 side, Mount Sopris side,
Can you
Mid
get
Valley
to the Hoffman from the
location.
bus stop though?
Sure.
Yeah, there's a bus stop right
I know,
there.
but there's a big chain link fence. I'm not hiking a fence to get to,
Yeah.
I'm gonna check that out. I think the Hoffman would be great to be Mid-Valley, but
And so I just wanted to get some, and that's what I was going to check in on, but we can talk about now a little bit. We're still waiting to hear from the Meadows. I'm expecting that to be 2 to 3 times the cost. The Limelight Snowmass was 2 to 3 times the cost of the other options, so we kind of took those off the table.
the Meadows is so nice, but like I said, Justin's not there.
Yeah.
It's usually pretty reasonable. Well,
So if there are any preferences, and Toclot would certainly provide a really unique and inspirational setting, and it could be a lot harder to get to if it snows, right?
and
It
I
could-
know they have Starlink, but I've heard it's very erratic, so if we need anybody who's gonna be zooming in, especially if we have bad weather. I think it's beautiful up there. I mean, it's an amazing, inspiring facility, but we need to make sure we don't have round tables, cause we'll all be, that does not conducive, at least to me, unless, yeah. But anyway, it's up to the majority of the board, but I think looking at the Hoffman would be a great opportunity.
I'm easy, really, honestly. I can
it's
see
omnibus
the
system.
downside of worrying, people are so worried about going to Toklat, I don't want to get in the way.
I would also ask our guests, that we have some invited guests as well, that we would love to attend in person rather than.
Not all. One is a sure thing, but I want to run that by you too before.
I'm dying to know.
I mean, I'd like to go to Toklat. I do think it may shorten the day, just relative for delays and travel times and things like that. But that's all. That's my. I don't know if we've given
So
you
it
clear
sounds like
direction
either
here.
Tokla or the Hoffman. There's not a lot of passion on either one. Am I hearing that correctly?
It depends on if Jeffrey's right, it'd be great. The really great thing about having what do you want, presenters, or what do you call it, is that they're in the room. And I don't know, because we're.
Hoffman is going to be easier to get to.
I think you answered your own question. If we can get the majority of people to be there and not battle with Star Wars, whatever it's called.
Star Wars, did you say? Yeah. Starlink. That's just what I've heard from people who.
Okay, we'll keep working. It sounds like both of those would work. We'll work out the logistics, see where we can get the most people. And okay, that's good direction. That's all I've got.
You'll tell us later who's going to be part of the panel?
Well, I want to get some feedback from y'all, but maybe we'll do that one-on-one a little bit, yeah.
Any other open discussion items?
Nope.
All right. We are going to finish up our work session then here.
Good job, Kelly.
And we will see everybody for our voting session at noon tomorrow, Wednesday, January 22nd. Thank you. Thank you, Grassroots.
I just way too, I am so